first introduce you, Mridul, about you to our scholars and faculty members briefly. Professor Mridul Neil is a professor in the Department of Civics and Politics, University of Mumbai. Currently, he is on deputation to State Election Commission, Maharashtra, on very important assignment this is, and heads the Institute of Democracy and Elections for Good Governance, a think tank for the State Election Commission. Two of his recommendations of strengthening NOTA are accepted by the State Election Commission, Maharashtra and Haryana. This is a great achievement. And he is a member of State Committee on Curriculum Design, New Education Policy of Maharashtra, chaired by Professor Raghunath Mashalkar in January 2021. He is a member of recently announced Women's Policy 2022 of the Government of Maharashtra. Neil is associated with many leading universities in Maharashtra in India and capacity of board member, Board of Studies Research Recognition Committee and Advisory Committee in Doctoral Research. His major works are in interventionist research, which are mostly original. He was elected to the Senate of University of Mumbai in 2022 and from amongst the postgraduate teachers. He served as a director, Students' Welfare University of Mumbai from March 2008 to 15. Neil was selected as a Hayes Fulbright Scholarship sponsored by US State Department to study national security policy making at United States Institute in US, and International Seminar on Economic and Development Young Scholars organized by Chinese Academy of Social Science, Beijing. And his PhD in Political Science, Right to Information, its implementation, causes and concern. He had several major research projects on Indian Council of Historical ICSSR, Good Governance of Health in Maharashtra, Implication Social Exclusion, Department of Tribal Development, State Election Commission, and several other agencies. And while in US, entire course of program was coordinated by his major project sponsored by Ministry of Tribal Affairs, Government of Maharashtra, entitled Mapping the Food Habits of Tribals in Maharashtra. While in US, the entire course program was coordinated by University of Delaware. He also had an opportunity to attend seminars, conference in Boston, Massachusetts, Institute of Technology, MIT, National Defense University, and Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, American Enterprise Institute, Center for New American Security. Apart from this, he was also briefed at the US mission to the UN and Pentagon. He is closely associated with the Institute of Chinese Studies. And the books written by Professor Neil is Right to Information. Second one is Re-Engineering Grassroots Governance. Third is Tailspin, Politics of India, China Economic Relation. And again, Tailspin, the Politics of India and China Economic Relation, Routledge. He is currently involved in teaching in University of Mumbai. He is a coordinator of MA courses and certificate courses. New paper on cephalogy is introduced, and also convened some of the conferences in climate change in South Asia. Apart from he has published in journals and periodicals, edited several books. So this is a very highly enlightening to all of our scholars and to read your about it also. Thank you so much, Neil, for sparing your time, valuable time.
Management Studies, University of Hyderabad. He has worked with IIM Shillong, Australian Council for Educational Research, New Delhi, and NIT Tiruchinapalli. He has a passion for research and has been a resource person for more than 200 workshops and FDP programs held at many universities and B schools in India. His expertise lies in the area of multivariate data analysis techniques, moderation analysis, structural equation modeling, latent profile analysis, and item response theory. He comes from both the management studies and he has a flair for data analysis. He is familiar with data analytics software such as MPLIS, MOS, Python, R, Jamovi, JASP, SPSS, Blue Sky Statistics, Conquest, and IRT Pro. He has finished his PhD from Anna University, Chennai, and his research interests are on work-family balance, work-family conflict and facilitation, work engagement and individual well-being, and educational assessment. He has much teaching interests in the area of business research methods, multivariate data analysis, mediation analysis, moderation analysis, conditional process modeling, and partial least square SEM. He has around 19 international journal publications, and he has organized events around the School of Management Studies, which are several. He has funded the project of assessing higher education quality using item response theory analysis, matching problem issues and solutions. He was also invited as a resource person for more than 220 sessions in various workshops, FDPs, MDPs, and conferences. And Sir has lots of exposure with analytical software packages. Sir, we are very happy to have you here. And Sir will be delivering a lecture on literature review today. Thank you.
University organizing team for inviting me to deliver this session. So afternoon itself I had a grand welcoming. Madam said you need to do the registration. So I said no ma'am, I'm the speaker for the next session. So I'm happy about that. At least I'm looking like a participant. So usually I do this, straight away I'll come back to the session content. Usually I do this session for 5 hours, at least 5 to 6 hours I used to do spend along with scholars, because I also teach a research methodology course for our PhD scholars. Right now I just completed my course part. Also I'm taking care of the PhD program at School of Management Studies. But within 1.5 hours, I don't know how best I'll be able to deliver the content. Yeah. So I'm not really sure how best I'll be able to deliver everything within 1.5 hours or maybe 1 hour 15 minutes time. So I'll try my level best to deliver everything within the cutoff limit. If you need more references, I suggest you to visit my site. You just type my full name in Google, you will get the site address. So here I have compiled a set of resources that might be useful to the scholars as well as faculty members coming from psychology and then management as well as commerce discipline. So if you look at this resources page, so there are some editorial comments were compiled here, and you do have a section called literature review. If you read this 8 references, you will get some mastery over understanding literature review. So whenever I say literature review, usually I in the sense any faculty who is delivering the research methodology course, or it can be anything. So we always remember there will be a chapter in thesis called literature review, but only in Indian standard, only in Indian universities, only in Indian thesis work, we could see this heading called literature review after the completion of your introduction section. But actually that is not literature review. Please try to understand that. From the empirical paper point of view, if you look at any of the top tier journal papers, you will have the following headings, subheadings like title, abstract, keywords, introduction, and then theory development as well as hypothesis specification. Then you have methods, measures, and then data analysis, results, discussion, practical implication, and then limitations and scope for future research, references, appendix if there are any. So this is going to be the typical content in most of the empirical research papers. But if you look at some of the low tier journals that is being published by some of the Indian publishing houses, as well as some of the thesis works published or maybe submitted by our own scholars, so they do pay a lot of weightage to the literature review section, and they used to create some 20-30 page content simply by narrating according to so and so they did this research, they have collected 350 responses, and then they did some analysis, and then finally this was the finding of this particular study, something like that they used to try. But that is not the appropriate way how you can present your literature review. For more details, you refer any of the standard research papers, you will get this logic. That is point number 1. Point number 2 is, I can look at this literature review or review of literature from 2 different perspectives. One is from the perspective of writing your qualitative research paper or maybe quantitative research paper. So what are the roles of literature review in terms of writing the research paper? That's the first perspective. Second perspective is writing some systematic review papers, systematic literature review papers or SLR papers. Any idea about SLR papers? Have you done any SLR work, systematic literature review work? Have you heard about something called narrative reviews, meta-analysis, meta-synthesis? Any idea? Do you know how to use Scopus database for downloading the meta information about the research papers? Have you used Clarivate Analytics database for downloading the meta information about the papers? Any idea? Please feel free to talk to me. Please treat me as your benchmate or maybe fellow mate who is attending this program. So it's all about mutual knowledge sharing. That's it. Don't think that I'm superior and you are inferior. I mean subordinate. Yeah. How to prepare? Questionnaire. Okay. If time permits at the end, I'll also give you some tips. Yeah. Because that is beyond my scope of this session, but I'll try to address this question. Feel free to ask any questions related to research. Don't ask me how to prepare food and all. Yeah.
Research scholars especially, leaving our faculty members, most of them are scholars only. So you have done this literature review, right? How you have done? You share with sir. He'll guide you how to do it better.
So any idea about using Scopus or Web of Science database for doing the literature review? I don't know whether Ambedkar University is subscribing Scopus database, but at HCU we have Scopus as well as Web of Science access. With the help of the database, we simply download the data and then you can do bibliometric analysis also to arrive the gap. See, there are multiple objectives are available in terms of doing literature review in general. So, I mean, literature review can be taught as a separate course, part of the PhD coursework. That much of content is available, but in a nutshell, I'll try to put everything within this 1.5 hours. So you please treat me this session as a kind of eye-opening session. Don't expect much from my side, because within 1.5 hours, I might not be able to deliver everything, even whatever is available in my PPT. Yeah, I'll talk about the second perspective. First perspective is writing your research paper, identifying the research gap, and then understanding the field. If you want to understand something more about the theory or maybe more about the concept or construct which you are trying to use it in your research work, even for that also you have to do some kind of literature review. Then the second major perspective is writing the entire manuscript completely related to SLR or maybe literature review. So you have, I mean, the highest level of SLR can be done with the help of meta-analysis. Any idea about meta-analysis? Have you seen at least 1 or 2 references or papers related to meta-analysis? Okay, that's fine. So meta-analysis is useful whenever you are trying to understand the field on the basis of the past empirical evidences. For example, as a health minister of this country, I would like to suggest one of the vaccine to cure COVID. Let us assume that you have 10 different vaccines, among which one I should suggest or which one I should pick up. So when you want to take this particular decision, so you can do meta-analysis on the basis of those 10 vaccine development study evidences, and then that will give you some overarching conclusion about publication bias and then the heterogeneity that exists in the data which was used to create their vaccine development paper. It can be anything. Don't think that just like that they are doing something in the laboratory and then they are releasing the final product. No, there are different phases of clinical trials they are supposed to do, and each and every phases they also publish a paper, maybe in the form of white paper or maybe in a journal, or maybe there are some consortiums also available. They are also they used to publish the paper. So meta-analysis is one of the way how you can also do the systematic literature review. Now I think bibliometric analysis is booming like anything in the field. You name any mediocre or A category journals, there are some papers, at least 1 or 2 papers are getting published related to their own journal related content. Then you have something called theory related reviews, and then narrative reviews, and then you have something called meta synthesis reviews, and then you have something called domain related review, methodological review, and then you have something called scoping review. So there are different types of reviews are available. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Naresh,
Murugan, ma'am, not Naresh. Myself, Murugan.
programs, okay.
Yeah, no issues.
I'm Madhuri from Department of English. We have got language and literature students also here.
Oh, fine, ma'am.
So that's the reason I was more interested. If you can throw more light on narrative, as you rightly pointed about.
I'll come back to that, ma'am. I have a separate slide for narrative reviews.
Because empirical is only for our language studies we do, but
Yeah.
when it comes to literature, it's not so.
Fine, ma'am. Surely, I'll try to cover something. If you look at the definition or maybe meaning of what is literature review, so I just kept something on the basis of the paper references, and Cochrane is one of the major body where they do a lot of systematic literature review. Mainly they use meta-analysis from the field of medical science. Meta-analysis is one of the widely accepted methodology in medical science field, where they try to analyze the past information in terms of giving some overarching conclusion about whatever may be the studies that was published in the past literature. So according to Cochrane collaboration, they are saying that a review of a clearly formulated question that uses systematic and explicit methods to identify, select and critically appraise relevant research and to collect and analyze data from the studies that are included in the review. So there is a meaning of literature review they are giving part of this particular citation. There are other definitions also available. I don't want to discuss much about discussing the definition and then from where it is coming and then how they have created this definition and all. So straight away we'll jump into the topic. So as I said earlier, if you look at the literature review objective, broader objective, there are two perspectives. One is understanding the research or maybe doing your own research process, or writing empirical research paper. So in introduction also you are supposed to cite few references. In theory development section also you are supposed to cite few references. In the discussion section also you are supposed to cite few references. There also literature review is playing a major role. Not only there, even in the method, data analysis, result section also, in order to justify your methodological approach, you are supposed to cite one or two references, standard references from either from methodological literature or maybe from the empirical literature where you are trying to do your research work. And then the second perspective is, again, as I said earlier, writing whole, or maybe full-fledged literature review paper. It can be in the form of meta-analysis or meta-synthesis or maybe meta-narratives or narrative reviews or kind of scoping review, methodological review. It can be anything. So the problem with writing literature review paper is there are advantages as well as disadvantages. One of the core advantages, when you publish a review paper, if somebody is going to do a research work, unless they cite your paper, they can't do anything. So in a way, you will get citation. That is one of the major advantage. Second advantage is you will get to know about what happened in the past with respect to that particular domain of research or maybe field of research. That's the second major objective, major advantage. With respect to disadvantages are concerned, suppose if you are working on some mushrooming related topic, mushrooming in the sense, one of the concept was recently released in the literature maybe 6 months back or 3 months back, and you may not be able to find much literature evidences related to that particular aspect. If you don't have enough papers, there is no point in writing literature review. But still you can do a literature review, but writing literature review is not essential over there. Able to understand? This is one of the major disadvantage. Second disadvantage is not exactly disadvantage, kind of limitation or maybe hiccup from the scholar's point of view. They don't know how to write the systematic literature review. Unless you read some of the really quality papers, you may not be able to understand the nuances of writing literature review paper. That's the second issue. During my PhD time, I wrote a literature review paper, and I have covered close to 12 years of duration, starting from 2005 to 2012 I have covered. And the paper length was around 60 pages, 60 or 65 pages, including all of the references. And word count was around 16,000 words. I have approached some of the A-star A category journals, and I got a lot of rejections. And finally what happened was it went inside into my thesis, as one of the literature review chapter. Even though I'm against to this particular practice, just to expand the thesis content, I just kept that particular chapter because nowhere I could able to publish it. The mistake which I have done in the early phase of my literature review writing was too much of content or too much of information is available in the research paper. But if you look at some of the recently published literature review papers, I don't think so it will go beyond 12 pages or 15 pages. If you actually count the word count, it may not be crossing even 10,000 words. So that is one of the major limitations. This was highlighted by one of the A-star category Journal of Vocational Behavior. Still I have those review comments with me. And second limitation was I was not knowing the exact process of writing the literature review paper also. So simply I just wrote something by summarizing this X is related to this Y and this M is, mediator is related to Y and this particular variable is related to this particular mediator or maybe moderator, something like that. I have written something and simply I just used content analysis. So those days content analysis is considered as one of the topmost technique in literature review, but these days you have a lot of machine learning techniques that is also taking place in systematic literature review. So that's the reason I could not able to publish my literature review paper in 2012. If you look at this slide, why literature review? So even to identify your research gap, so how do you identify the research gap? Any idea? Before that, can somebody give me a definition of research gap? Not exactly definition, what is research gap?
This is the area where nobody has thought of. Already there are studies which we can base on the previous existing knowledge. Then when we talk about research gap, whenever we read a thesis, at the end of the thesis we have the suggestions and suggestions for further research. It is there where we allocate certain areas which have not been touched.
Okay.
Probably have been left knowingly, unknowingly, and proceeded with the other major topics.
Okay.
So it is at that juncture where we try to locate this activity or the topics.
Okay, if something is missing, if something is not extended, means that is considered as a research gap. So this is what our most of the Indian university understanding about research gap. But actually from the theory development, theoretical contribution point of view, yes, it is gap only. So this particular approach is referred as gap spotting. This is not problematization. Just a minute, ma'am. I just want to show you a paper. I don't have enough time to narrate everything with respect to understanding what is gap spotting and then problematization. I suggest you to refer my site. The heading is, you go to resources page and then the heading is there is a heading on research question. Yeah, just go to this heading and then you please start your reading from this particular paper, ways of constructing research questions, gap spotting or problematization, published in organization. You first read this paper and then you go through this paper, Alveson and Sandberg, generating research questions through problematization, that got published in Academy of Management Review. These two references will give you fresh perspective of understanding what is research gap. So for example, in a plain terminology, research gap means X and Y is already established in the literature, Y and Z is not been established so far. So I'm trying to connect Z with this X and Y relationship. So this is going to be the gap as far as my theoretical model or maybe my research is concerned. This is how we are trying to formulate our theoretical model. This is how we are trying to justify our research gap. With the help of this, probably you could able to aim maybe some low tier journal or maybe up to A category also you can aim, but you can't aim number 1, number 2 journal in your, top number 1, number 2 journal in your field. That is impossible. So unless you problematize something, unless you drastically change something, unless radically you contribute something to the existing body of literature, I don't think so you can warrant some publication from journals like Academy of Management Journal. For management scholars, Academy of Management Journal is considered as one of the top tier journal. So they expect something, innovative in the sense nothing to do with sample and other things. So the theory advancement should be really robust, as well as your paper should bring a lot of novelty to the field. Otherwise, I don't think so they will accept your paper. So what I'm trying to convey here is, even to identify the research gap, proper research gap, you have to do literature review. Yes, ma'am.
This is, yeah, especially when you said about that research gap.
Yeah.
In the language and literature point of view, we see from what is the add-on value that we give to the present learned and lived experience.
Yes.
And what is the gap? Whether is it oriental or is it central? As you said, x plus x and y, z is there. At the same time, what kind of perspective we have got an engagement?
Yeah.
And that gap, because it is not quantitative, but it is a qualitative. It's a lived experience.
Yeah.
From that perspective, in the management and commerce, we can see the qualitative, quantitative. Whereas when it comes to literature, we are coming from the lived experiences. That's what Noam Chomsky rightly points out between the.
Yeah, that is true, ma'am. In different field, they consider different, concepts as gap. For example, in pure science research, applied research, what they do is they try to discover something. For them, it's a innovation. For them, it's a contribution. But in most of the social science research work, we never innovate something. We never invent something like a practical product, or maybe that can be readily available to the consumers or customers. I don't think so. Yes. We are doing those sort of research work, but yours is more, based on the understanding, yours is like more of application oriented research work. Yeah. Yes, yes. So, but from the general social science point of view, this is how we try to problematize something. For more details, you please go through that paper, probably you may get some more understanding. Yeah. Now you look at why literature review with respect to the second perspective. Even to identify the research gap, you are supposed to do literature review. And then if you want to understand your own domain of research, concept or some theory or field of research, or even to understand some methodological content, for example, how to do regression, look at some of the research papers that will give you some idea about understanding the regression analysis process. Similarly, how do you do the content analysis? There are some papers published in the literature. You do some thorough literature review, you will get to know about how to do the content analysis. So even to understand methodological part, you need to do some kind of literature review. Fine. Then writing. When it comes for writing the research paper, this is all the broader content we use in our social science or maybe management research. If it is empirical in nature, the paper is empirical in nature. So we have introduction section, theory development section, hypothesis specification or hypothesis development section, and then you have methods, measures, data analysis, and then discussion. Everywhere, one or other way, you have to cite one or two references. Those citations are actually coming from your literature review process only. You able to understand? This is the first perspective of understanding literature review, role of literature review. Now you look at the second perspective. You can do a systematic review paper. You can actually write a separate paper on literature review. For example, you look at AMR. Any idea about Academy of Management Review? At any point of time, anybody is from commerce and management discipline? Have you heard about Academy of Management Review journal? Please refer at least one or two papers if that is freely coming through Google Scholar or some other sources. You will get to know the quality of papers that is being published by the organizational science scholars. So AMR publishes only theory and conceptual related papers. Theory and conceptual related papers, and they try to create propositions out of their reviews. Basically, review is one stage, second stage is development of the theory, and then they try to come up with set of propositions. As a researcher, you can also take those propositions and then further you can test it by running some experiments or maybe survey research. It can be anything. So that is one sort of output you can also expect by doing the systematic literature review. Second is you can also do kind of methodological review. That is also possible. There are some papers available in the literature where they did some systematic literature review to highlight something about some of the methods. Methods in the sense, for example, how survey research is conducted in the past, or how do you do the analysis using XYZ technique or some technique. Even for that also you can come up with some review papers. Let me show you some of the reference papers to understand different types of reviews. with respect to theory development, you look at this paper. This paper is coming from Academy of Management Review. Already I have shared almost all of this references to your support person, technical support person. So he'll be able to share everything to you. So when work and family are allies, a theory of work family enrichment, if you look at this particular paper, here they have proposed a new theory on work family enrichment. So this is the theory they have proposed. Here whatever may be the numbers you are seeing, those numbers are referring propositions basically. Those numbers are referring propositions. Later, lot of empirical papers were published in the literature by taking all those propositions basically. Getting my point? This is one way of writing the systematic literature review. Then I'll show you another paper. This is methodology based review. So here group of authors have written something related to event study methodology. Event study methodology in the marketing literature and overview. So this is one of the really top tier journal in marketing discipline, Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science. For more details, you just note down the title and then you try to refer it on your own. And then you have something called bibliometric review. So this is one of the sample reference I would like to show you here. So here they are trying to review something related to consumer brand relationships research, a bibliometric citation meta-analysis. So here they have two different components. The first component is bibliometric, second component is related to meta-analysis. Both has been incorporated into this paper. This is another reference. Now I'll show you one of the meta-analysis paper. So this paper is about using meta-analysis, got published in Journal of Management Studies, one of the FT50 journal. Which resources matter, how and where, a meta-analysis on firms, foreign establishment, mode choice and so on. So this is one of the sample paper to understand meta-analysis. You just use meta-analysis keyword in Google Scholar, you get a lot of papers. Then you have something called framework based review. So here they have created something called 7P framework for international marketing. So this is framework based review. Then you have structured review, 5 decades of research on export barriers, review and future direction. This is something related to structured review. So what I'm trying to convey here is you have different types of SLRs, that is systematic literature reviews. So which one I should use, which one I should refer, which one I should be doing in the near future. That is the call you have to take. So even to write systematic literature review paper, you need to identify the gap. Basically, you have to spot the gap. Why it is essential, why it is required. So for example, in 2013, there was a paper published related to your domain of research. Now again, you are trying to do one more round of literature review. Why it is required? That's a question you should ask yourself. See, I'll give you a simple mantra in research. For everything you ask why, also you ask so what. These two questions will give you much more clarity than attending several other workshops similar to this nature, as well as listening to several other people similar to this session. Are you getting my point? You ask why, also you ask so what. These two questions will solve most of the issues in your research. Fine. So now we'll discuss something about what is meta-analysis, and then madam is interested to know something about narrative reviews as well as meta-synthesis. So we'll have some discussion about that. So when meta-analysis is required, I'll give you some idea, rough idea to understand this. Before that, let me hear something from the participants, because running the post-lunch session is really difficult. So what is meta-analysis? Have you read any paper related to meta-analysis in the past, part of your research journey? Yeah, please, ma'am.
Switch on the mic.
It is something which a researcher is analyzing the previously done research, the findings of the previously done research.
Analysis
Fine.
about analysis.
Exactly. CRISP's definition to understand what is meta-analysis. So, for example, let me take only one of the simple example. For example,
So you want
that's fine, ma'am. I'll manage it. For example, there are some studies existing in the past to link job autonomy with job satisfaction. Similarly, there are other studies also available where they have linked job resources with job satisfaction, supervisor support with job satisfaction, and then colleague support with job satisfaction, top level management support with job satisfaction, and then family support with job satisfaction, and so on. Let us assume that here my focus is about understanding job satisfaction. I mean the antecedent part of or predictor part of job satisfaction. So here what I'll be doing is I'll use job satisfaction as one of the keyword in my literature review process, and then I'll try to download almost all sort of papers published during that particular duration. You have to fix the time limit also, or you can fix some criteria. Recently I have seen some of the meta-analysis papers where they have considered only A and A star category papers to be included in their meta study. They are not considering all other references. But typically in any meta study, you have to consider research papers, I mean journal articles, as well as conference papers, as well as dissertations, and so on. How do we get the dissertations? There are some great literature sources are available. There you would be able to get the dissertations. But apart from that, you can make use of Scopus database as well as Web of Science database as well as EBSCO database in terms of, collecting your references to be used in your meta study. Then after that, what you need to do is you need to consider those relationship weights, regression weights. That is the raw data for your future meta-analysis study. So you need to take the regression weight between job autonomy and job satisfaction, also the sample size which was reported in that paper. Unless you have this two information, either bivariate correlation value or regression value, you can't do any meta-analysis study. If the report is based on some kind of ANOVA based analysis, you need to get the effect size value also. Unless you have that effect size value, you can't do meta-analysis basically. Are you getting my point? So based on these inputs, you can run some meta regression, you can run some meta SEM or maybe meta path analysis that will give you some overarching conclusion about what happened in the past in terms of connecting several antecedents or predictors with your job satisfaction construct. So to get this holistic understanding, one can do meta-analysis. So that is nothing but meta-analysis. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So this kind of article comes under qualitative research,
Quantitative.
qualitative.
Quantitative.
But here is analyzing also.
See, with respect to SLR is concerned, you have again two streams, qualitative, quantitative. Meta-synthesis, narrative reviews are coming under qualitative component. Meta-analysis is purely coming under quantitative component. You have meta-synthesis also. And then narrative reviews. Meta-analysis is purely quantitative in nature. There we deal with numbers. Meta-analysis study can go as a thesis also, PhD thesis also. There are some studies published in Western universities, but hardly I see some of the dissertation works happening in India. Even I am trying my level best, but I am not getting any scholars, who can do meta study and so on. See, in meta-analysis, the beauty is need not to go anywhere beyond your cabin. You use your laptop, you collect everything, and then you learn the methodology, that's it. With no time, you would be able to write the paper. That is possible. Yes, ma'am.
Do we have to make a limit like we are considering 2000 till now?
That time limitation you need to take a call. For example, I come from work family conflict literature. There are papers keep on getting published in really top tier journals. Let me show you some of the meta-analysis evidences related to work family conflict. Just a minute. See, if you look at this particular reference, this got published in 2012, dispositional variable and work family conflict, a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis of work family conflict and social support. So here their focus is how social support is reducing work family conflict. Basically they are dealing with only two mechanisms, two constructs. So limiting the time duration is purely dependent on your research objective. Suppose if you are trying to connect job resources with the job satisfaction, nothing is available in the past literature in terms of doing a meta study related to this aspect, means you can cover almost starting from 1920, 1940 to 2023. Are you getting my point? But if you are trying to do social support and work family conflict, means you have to start your review after 2018. Because prior to 2018, these people might have covered everything, no? You can freeze the timeline. Same logic is applicable with respect to writing other sort of reviews also. Any further question? Fine? Fine. So now try to understand something about qualitative SRs. Under the qualitative SRs, you have narrative reviews and then meta synthesis. Any idea about narrative reviews? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Any
I thought literature and language students are also there.
Yeah, sure, ma'am.
Them to
Yeah. So any idea about narrative reviews quickly? We don't have enough time.
Literature not there.
It is something about findings of previous studies which a researcher will narrate like in a systematic way.
Kind of. Look at the slide meanwhile. Yes, ma'am. You are trying to say something. Yes, ma'am.
Usually, narrative methods usually are used in qualitative,
Yes.
and narrative is something to do with the descriptive nature of the work.
Yes.
Whatever study we are doing, it's narrated in such a way where the chronology is maintained.
Yeah, very
all
good.
details are maintained.
Very good, ma'am.
At the field, like directly to the field, we connect
Yes.
to the field, and it's more of descriptive in nature.
Yes, in qualitative data analysis, we use something called narrative discourse analysis.
Yes.
There something, there the objective is something different from actually writing narrative reviews. But whatever you have mentioned, that is correct only. So in narrative reviews, what happens is we consider mostly empirical papers to do the narrative reviews, and it's a highly topic focused one. See, for example, I also told you that SLR can be written in terms of narrating something related to meta-analysis or maybe methodological reviews. Those sort of things can be done. But in narrative reviews, mainly our focus is about understanding some topic or maybe some XYZ topic in your domain or maybe discipline of your research. So here we use, yes ma'am.
Yeah, it's more about the perspective.
Yes.
Whether it's a chronology or the language or the
Yes.
subject or geography, or what exactly the narrative trying to tell, what
Yes.
perspective,
Yes.
what is the story.
Yes.
So that's what we are focusing. But
Very
when it comes to, as you rightly pointed out in meta analysis,
Yeah.
we don't have X, Y, but we assume like we have X, Y, and why we come to a derivative of Z.
Yes, very
So
true.
that's the reason we always go about with perspective and what kind of value addition we give to the narrative.
Yes.
So when it comes to Kafka's, or maybe it is right now with the God of Small Things, or what is happening around with multidisciplinary. So we always have that perspective in a holistic approach. So
True.
it comes X to Y and Y to Z.
True, very true, ma'am. I also completely agree with your point. Just look at the first paragraph which was mentioned in this slide. A narrative review would be appropriate when a literature review is desired in relation to a collection of quantitative studies that have used diverse methodologies or that have examined different theoretical conceptualizations, constructs or relationships and so on. And mostly here we deal with quantitative studies without referring to any of the statistical significance. So we just look at the kind of relationship which was explored in the past, and then we try to provide some new perspective or maybe new sort of understanding in terms of narrating the relationships which was explored in the past. Whereas in meta-analysis, we again quantify the relationship which was already tested in the past literature. That's the difference between meta as well as narrative reviews. In both the cases, we deal with quantitative research papers. Getting the clarity? Then look at the last point. They are a particularly useful means of linking together studies on different topics for reinterpretation or interconnection in order to develop or evaluate a new theory. Each piece of evidence reviewed draws its value from how it helps build or evaluate the overarching theory and so on. Best example is you look at some of the AMR papers. First stage is doing narrative review. Based on their narrative reviews, they try to develop a new theory basically. So there they use mostly grounded theory logic and inductive logic to develop their propositions. I hope you have some clarity and understanding deductive as well as inductive reasoning. Do you need any clarity? Fine? Yeah. So now look at meta synthesis. What is meta synthesis? If you are trying to do a SLR by keeping or referring only qualitative research papers, if that is the case, what you are trying to do is meta synthesis, not meta analysis, not narrative reviews. Getting my point? If you are trying to do a review on the basis of qualitative research paper evidences, for example, in sociology domain, hardly we see some papers purely empirical in nature. In those cases, what they do is when they want to summarize the past literature evidences, they need to do something called meta synthesis. Now, at least able to remember three concepts: meta-analysis, narratives, and then meta-synthesis. Any questions? Are completely bouncing? Fine. Look at this slide. Key stages in conducting a systematic review. First one is you have to determine the scope under which boundary condition you are going to do your review. Second one is planning. I'll discuss each and every points in a detailed manner. Third one is identification, that is searching. Fourth one is screening the literature. Fifth one is eligibility. Sixth one is assessing the study quality. And then seventh one is you have to present your SR, systematic reviews. These are the 7 stages you have to follow. Typically, these are the 6 or 7 stages you have to follow when you are trying to write any systematic reviews. Fine. So now first one is scoping. So how do you determine the scope of your systematic review? So first point is formulate one or more research questions. What do you want to know and about what topics? Do you have a clear idea of the type of research findings that will be relevant to addressing your research questions? Who will be your audience? Who is going to read this review basically? If you are writing something which can be referred by only journal editors, means that is not having wider scope. Getting the acceptance from any of the journalists is really difficult. If you are writing some review that will be read by only within China, some regional population, means the scope is not really wider. Are you getting my point? Able to understand? If you are trying to write something or if you are trying to do a literature review with respect to focusing on a topic which is widely studied in a subdomain of some major literature and you don't have much wider audience, means again getting the acceptance is really difficult. If you carefully look at some of the published literature review evidences, they try to cover broader spectrum of people as well as broader spectrum of topics or maybe theories and so on. You will get this logic when you read more review papers. And then who will be your audience? Why will a review be useful? These are the few checklist sort of questions you can ask yourself. Clear, specific and answerable research questions are the starting point for a clear and comprehensive review. Consider the breadth of the review. Clarify whether a review has already been done in this area. I think already I have mentioned this point in the beginning of the session. Become familiar with the literature, updating an existing systematic review and so on. So these are the few points you need to consider when you are trying to go for the next stage of doing the literature review. Planning. So formulate unambiguous search terms that operationalize your research questions. Consider different terminology. For example, if you are trying to do something related to sustainability review, sustainability on what? We have something called sustainable finance, sustainable HRM, sustainable marketing, sustainability in the context of energy, sustainability in the context of something else. Are you getting my point? Able to understand? So sustainability of what? You have to determine your keywords basically. So after determining the keywords, you need to use some of the truncations. Any idea about truncations? I'll show it in the next slide. Yeah, here I'll show you what is truncation and all. So here in the planning phase, you have to determine your keywords for your literature review. Can you give some keywords related to something related to your own domain of literature? Can you give some keywords? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, gender.
Gender is not too narrowed. Gender in what context?
Gender in what?
Top management, gender equality or gender disparity, or gender in education, or enrollment in education. Are you getting my point? So you have to narrow down your such terms also. There are certain strategies you can follow. For example, gender with respect to some XYZ context, or with respect to some country, or with respect to some population, those things you need to determine in the planning stage. Now getting the clarity? Make sense? So for example, you can also use some synonymous words like recycle, refuse, salvage, and then recover. These are all the terminologies that is referring the same thing basically. You can use R in Scopus or Web of Science database. You have different Boolean operators, right? Any idea about Boolean operators? Or, and not, or not. And then using truncations, wildcards. Any idea about all those things? Fine. I'll try to share something more about that. And then different spellings. In US they use COLOR. In India we use COLOUR. Utilizing S versus using Z. So those things you need to remember. Able to understand?
Whether we should follow only one, whether you wanted to follow the British,
Both.
then we should-
Possible, you try to follow everything.
Yeah. If
Using
not-
R command.
Yeah. And another thing is, if you are following MLA's type sheet or maybe, it should be very specific which year you are following.
Yes.
So if not, again we'll end up with using both the R's.
No, year is fine, ma'am. But here my question is, for example, sustainability is used in different terms in different domains.
Context.
Green marketing is also somewhat referring sustainability only.
Yes.
Should I use green marketing along with sustainability marketing or sustainable marketing? Are you getting my point? If possible, use everything. During the screening stage, you remove those references.
Which are not required.
Yes. Because in the initial stage itself, if you are leaving some of the paper means at the end of the day, you are doing some dubious work. Don't waste your time. Able to get my point? Yeah. And then broader versus narrower terms. For example, Britain, England, Scotland. If you are, for example, import export. With respect to which country? With respect to which continent? There you are supposed to use this set of terminologies. And then classification terms used by the databases. For example, if you go to some of the databases, there also they have some classification. I need papers from only psychology. I need papers from only sociology. I need papers from only humanities. Like that you have some classification terminologies also. Those things also you can use. Then in the planning stage, you formulate your preliminary inclusion and exclusion criteria. Simple logic is you follow some of the already published literature review paper inclusion exclusion criteria based on your research objective. That's a simple logic you can follow. Then justify inclusion and exclusion criteria like research questions, definitions of the concepts, measures or key variables, research designs, participants, time frame, data and etc. Revisit and reflect on inclusion and exclusion criteria by referring again past literatures, evidences, and then create clear record keeping systems and keep consistent and meticulous records by working systematically. So whenever you are working on systematic reviews or systematic literature reviews, you have a Excel file with you. So there you copy paste the entire keywords which you have used for doing this particular review. I'll show you where you can get all those keywords and so on. Also you record the time, date when you have done your, when you have done your review. I mean, for example, right now I'm doing something, you record the time as well as date also. Sometime you, not sometime, in most of the cases in your methodology section of your literature review paper, you have to mention everything. Makes sense? Because next day also somebody might have published a paper, then that will be like one of the major limitation of your research. In order to avoid this limitation, better to keep time and date information in your method section. Clear? Then you can also follow some of the guidelines. Prisma guideline is one of the famous guideline which was widely accepted as well as followed in medical science to other literature also. You can also follow this CONSART guideline. Moose guideline is another guideline. In Cochrane they follow different guideline for doing the systematic review as well as meta-analysis. So you can follow any of the guideline with respect to your domain of research. Then identification, searching. So first thing is search at least 2 different electronic databases. So select databases that are relevant to your topic, example Scopus, Web of Science and so on. I'll show you how to do the search through Scopus at least. I don't know whether the access is available here, let me check. Consider which parts of articles you want to search, abstract, full text, title or body text or keyword, those things also you can freeze. Consider using limits and filters to search by article type, whether you want to locate only review articles. Suppose if you are trying to do a systematic review about the past review articles published in your literature. So there you are looking at only review articles. You are not looking at qualitative papers or maybe quantitative papers. So that's the call you need to take. And research synthesis, empirical articles, subject categories, subheadings, etc. Consider using Boolean operators like and, or not, and so on. So try to use this wisely. And use truncation symbol. For example, in some databases they use dollar symbol. In most of the databases they use asterisk symbol. In some databases you can also use this double quotation mark symbol. That is also possible. For example, here to look for all words starting with a particular combination of letters. For example, weigh, W-E-I-G-H, if you add dollar symbol, it will look for weight, weightage, weighing, everything will be picked by your database. Make sense? Then using a wildcard symbol, example using hashtag or question mark or dollar symbol depending on the database. See, each and every database follows different strategy. That you need to understand after visiting the help section of that particular database. You will get those details over there. To stand in for one character, example, woman. For example, you have MEN, MAN. Here you just keep WOM, last letter N, with a hashtag. You will be able to locate the papers wherever woman as well as MEN was mentioned. So this is what, these are all the wildcard strategies you can use. There are other strategies also available. Yes, ma'am.
Just have a doctrine, what is the truncation? Because when it comes to a novel,
Yeah.
we always write in italics.
Okay.
We cannot use underline nor the bold. When it comes to citation of an article, we put into inverted commas.
Yeah.
And when you are doing the even 3 dots, so it is a continuation. 4th dot will be a, so that also comes under the truncation.
No, here truncation is for searching, ma'am. Nothing to do with your MLA style of writing references and all.
So that's not.
No. For example, here I am just typing work engagement as one of the keyword. Work engagement as one of the keyword. You just look at the search result. How many lakhs? Close to 70 lakh results you got. Now let me use double quotation mark here. So here what is happening is, previously Google Scholar search engine has considered work as a separate entity, engagement as separate entity. Wherever work alone is also mentioned, those papers also retrieved by Google Scholar. Wherever engagement is separately mentioned and along with work and engagement, everything was extracted by Google Scholar. Now when I use this double quote, now you look at the search result is only 2,25,000 results.
So this is single entity now because we have kept it in one.
Yes. Able to understand? Or you try to make use of advanced search option. So in advanced search option, you can also use and or command and so on. In Google Scholar, you have different logic, but in Scopus and all, there is a possibility of keeping or and so on. Now able to understand the difference? Then using the truncation symbol between words, for example, midsummer with asterisk dream will return results that contain the exact phrase a midsummer night's dream. Fine. Using parenthesis because commands within these run first, example smoke or tobacco. These are some of the strategies you can use. And then you can use publication year as another strategy, another filtering criteria. And then you may have to check the inter-rater reliability. For example, as a supervisor, you do the same literature review. You ask another person to do the literature review, whether both of them are getting similar results. If you are not getting similar result, which means that something is wrong with respect to person X or person Y searching process. Then carefully inspect the search results, conduct additional searches to ensure that all potentially relevant published and unpublished work has been located. Locating unpublished work. For example, there are some grey literatures are available. You go to www.opengrey.eu or this sherpa.ac.uk. These are all some of the places, and then you have WorldCat and then Google and Google Scholar. These are all the places where you can also get some of the unpublished research papers. See, for example, madam wrote something, it was not submitted anywhere, just lying in your desktop, but you have added this information in the Google Scholar. When I do a literature review, by using that keyword, that will be picked by the system. That is nothing but unpublished papers. In some cases, people also write some kind of white papers, they just upload it in their website. Then after that, whoever wants to read as well as cite, they can cite. So nowhere, none of the journal will be giving this particular reference. So those sort of references can be obtained even using simple Google search also. That is possible. Clear? The next one is screening. You export references to a citation manager to collate the search results, read the title and or abstract or identified work. Are you using any softwares like EndNote or Mendeley? Any idea about some of the citation manager softwares? Sorry, ma'am?
I have an idea of
Mendeley. How many of you are using some reference management software here? Mendeley. 1, 2. You are also using, right, ma'am? Okay. So hardly 2 of them are using some citation manager. Please, I beg you, please try to make use of some of the open source or maybe commercial softwares to craft your references. Reason is you can save a whole lot of time actually. For example, in India, my name is Murugan Pattusamy. Murugan is first name, Pattusamy is my father's name. In Tamil Nadu, we use this logic to keep our name. As per educational records, my name is Murugan P. That's it. No Pattusamy at all. Only for research paper publications, I use this Pattusamy business. In Western country, Jeffrey Edwards means Jeffrey is father name, Edward is first name. If you are going to create a citation using APA logic or MLA logic or Chicago logic, even to identify the first name and last name of the Western author is really difficult. It's a mad job, real mad job. Need not to bother about all those things when you use this sort of softwares. I'll show you something. This is EndNote software. I use EndNote software for crafting the references because most of my co-authors from US and UK, they also use EndNote software. For me, the compilation is really easier, so that's the reason I'm using EndNote software. So I bought this original software by paying 21,000 rupees something, but you can also use some of the open source softwares like Zotero, and then you have Mendeley. These are all the free open source options you have. For more details, you please visit my site. There you will get some idea. So now let me go to Scopus. I don't know whether Scopus is subscribed here. Let me try and then I'll show you. Here Scopus is not subscribed, so I'm using my institution email ID. Let me check whether I'm getting the access from Scopus. Yeah. So now through my university library, I'm using this Scopus. Of course, fortunately or unfortunately, your institute is not having. So how do we do the search? Is it visible to you? Able to see? Should I maximize it further? Now? Perfectly fine. So for example, I'm trying to use a name called, construct called family incivility. So I'm also using double quotation. I'm telling the Scopus, you please treat family incivility as a separate construct. Now I'm trying to understand family incivility with some other construct. So for that, what you can do is, here you can click this add search field, okay, and then here you can use and R command. Click this double quotation mark. With no time, the citation will be created as well as embedded in your body text. With no time, you can also change this APA 6th edition to Harvard style of writing. With no time, you can also convert this into particular journal style also. Close to more than 5,000 journal specific citation styles also available along with EndNote software. So for example, if I'm going to submit this paper to Journal of Applied Psychology, you just select Journal of Applied Psychology style. So this is a format they follow. Here, there is no room for making any errors. Not only that, today you are submitting this paper to some X journal. You got the rejection. Tomorrow you are looking for Y journal. That they are asking you to report everything in Harvard style of writing. So how do you convert them into Harvard style of writing? With no time, with the help of software, you can do it. For example, now I wrote this chapter. Madam wrote another chapter. She is the co-author of my paper. So now I want to compile everything together. With no time, you can compile it. That is possible. Once screening is over, now you need to think about eligibility criteria. Suppose, for example, you are trying to do a literature review on family incivility construct, but you also got some paper on workplace incivility. Both are not same, different one. So you have to fix some eligibility criteria. So this paper is away from our focal area of research. So let me remove this paper from the entire bunch of articles which I have downloaded from the literature review process. So examine the full text version of potentially eligible articles, extract all potentially relevant information, and then you do that, and then study quality. Usually the study quality is assessed whenever they are trying to do some meta synthesis or meta analysis to take some policy decisions. For example, at the country level, they would like to implement something called user-based insurance scheme. Very soon we are going to get this scheme called user-based insurance, usage-based, not user, usage-based insurance. In Western countries, already they have successfully implemented. For example, I own a car. I never go beyond 100 kilometers in a month. Why I should pay 16,000, 20,000 as a insurance? Are you getting my point? So based on your kilometers driven, you can make your premium payment basically. This concept is nothing but usage based premium. Now, when you want to take this decision at the center level, you can't just like that implement it. Since I am liking this concept, since insurers are promoting this concept. Are you getting my point? So you look at the past study evidences, what the evidences are saying, whether this is beneficial to the end user, whether this is beneficial to the government. So you need to take this sort of policy decision. So in those cases, what they do is they try to do some kind of meta-analysis or meta-synthesis. So while doing this, just like that, they can't include all the bits and pieces of evidences for their review purpose. So they have to do some kind of assessment of study quality. So there are some tools and techniques are available. For more detail, I'll show you one of the annual review paper. There you will get more details. So selecting a tool to assess study quality, problems with study quality tools and so on. For example, if it is quantitative study evidences, they also assess the statistical power of the test to assess the study quality and so on. Whether the person has followed almost all of the principles in terms of running their experiments. So from those perspectives, you can also understand this particular study quality assessment process. And then finally, you try to present a systematic review. So when you are trying to write a systematic literature review paper, there's all the broader sections of your manuscript. First one is introduction. Second one is method. Discuss borderline cases, present a flow diagram. If you look at any of the review papers, mostly they used to keep some kind of flow chart. Initially, how many papers they have obtained. In the first round of screening, how many papers got rejected. In the second round of screening, how many papers got rejected. And then finally, how many papers they have considered. And then the final inclusion, exclusion criteria. All those things will be clearly communicated in the form of a flow diagram. So that you have to craft it when you are trying to do the literature review. Then results do not simply summarize, but offer a new, improved understanding of the phenomena, presenting qualitative findings, and then giving some counter examples to your summary. All those things are matters. And then discussion, summarize the literature progress, propose the future direction for the study, and then finally appendice. So these are the few things you need to consider in your review paper. So already I have shared almost everything, all of these papers as well as my PPT through a pen drive. So everything is sitting in the administrator laptop. Feel free to share it among the participants. So again, my submission is whatever I have discussed here is not even 0.1% of understanding literature review. So when it comes for writing the empirical paper, what is the role of literature review? We can have a separate session. When it comes for writing a systematic literature review, even for that also we can have a separate session. To use truncations, wildcards in different databases, different truncations are used. To understand only the technical part alone, we can have a day-long session. That much of content is available. I'm not an expert in that area. You better look for some librarian. They are the expert in terms of teaching that particular strategy. And then how do you narrate, how do you summarize the past review? To understand this particular component alone, we can have a separate session. So that much of content is available. For more details, you please visit my site. Here I have given a lot of references, useful references that may help you to understand something more about research. So you please visit this resources page. I'm also copy pasting this link in the chat window of Zoom meeting. So you can also share it with others. So with that, I'm closing my presentation. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
From citing an information which is actually present in some others,
Yeah.
which is already cited by them.
Yeah.
I'm repeatedly citing that in my paper. I did not note the original source.
Yeah.
Is it an ethical practice, or shouldn't I do that?
Very good question, ma'am. I'll answer something, but over and above my answer, you can also look at this paper. Crafting references in AMJ submissions. So here you will get some clarity in terms of understanding how to cite the paper, when to cite the paper, what sort of citations, what sort of references you can also bring it to your paper. Those things you will get it from this particular reference. So now to answer your question, for example, it depends. That's a simple answer. For example, in the measurement section, I would like to cite a scale. To measure work engagement, there is a scale that is coming from Shuffley et al. Baker. So I need to cite that particular reference. Even that Shuffley et al. Paper was cited by you, need not to cite your paper to show the citation of this particular scale development paper. Are you getting my point? You can cite your reference as a cross reference. You cite Shuffley et al., that is important. Along with that, the following people also used this particular scale. To justify that, you bring other references. This is one way. Second, definition. Lim and Tai has proposed the definition of defining what is family instability in 2014. It got published in Journal of Applied Psychology. In Bai et al. Paper also, they have cited Lim and Tai definition. Now I should not cite Bai et al. Paper to cite or to define what is family instability in my paper. I should cite Lim and Tai only. Are you getting my point? So it depends, ma'am. For example, relationship between job autonomy and job satisfaction is studied by madam as well as myself. Now you are trying to study the same relationship in your paper. Which one I should pick it up? Both you can cite, or one of the citation you can mention. That is fine.
And adding up to that, the variable also is very important.
Yes.
Because the variable that your research is citing is different from my research.
Yes.
The common variable will be always be cited simultaneously.
Yes.
And the variable which is different can always be individually.
Yes. Yes. And one more myth I would like to break it here. Indian scholars mostly they are thinking that when I keep more citations in my paper, I am adding more value. Absolute myth and absolute rubbish thing. So if you have more number of references, unwanted references, actually that will spoil the quality of the paper rather than improving the quality. So in methodology section, to justify everything, what I do is, I never bring each and every individual journal paper based references to justify my methodology section. Rather, I look for a holistic book. That book will take care of almost all of the things. So that you can minimize, instead of citing 4-5 references, you can cite only one reference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr.B.R.
No, thank you, ma'am.
Any questions?
Any
Scholars-
questions?
Scholars especially, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions.
Yeah, please, ma'am.
What difference that asterisk sign brings
Sorry, ma'am.
in truncation? We are using asterisk sign.
Yes.
So what difference does that make?
No, in some of the databases, they use double quotation mark as a truncation mark. In some databases, they use asterisk symbol. Some of the medical science databases, they use asterisk. In Google Scholar, the truncation which I have used was double quotation.
So my next question is that you have we have to provide flow chart for findings. So what kind of flow chart?
See, you follow any of the standard guideline, like Prisma guideline or Consort guideline. I guess here I have Prisma guideline also. Yeah, here is the paper. If you go through this sort of guideline papers, you will get to know what are the things we are supposed to report it in the flow chart as well as in the form of table. For example, can you see this flow chart? Oh, I think I have not shared my screen. Just a minute. Sorry. Yeah, this is one of the paper, ma'am. I have shared everything to him. The Prisma statement for reporting systematic reviews and meta-analysis of studies that evaluate healthcare interventions, explanation and elaboration. If you go down, I think in the last page, you have a flow chart. Yeah, if you look at this flow chart, flow of information through the different phases of a systematic review, this is what the major content: identification strategy, screening, eligibility, included versus excluded. Now here they have given some example also. So the evidences were identified through PubMed database, Embase database and the Cochrane library meeting abstracts, UE, GW, DDW and so on. Such results combined were 115 papers. Articles screened on the basis of title and abstract was 88. And then included was 27 and then excluded was 6, and they have also cited the reason. And finally they have considered 21 references, 7-day versus 14-day therapy, 7-day versus 14-day versus 10-day therapy, 7-day versus 10-day therapy. These are the 21 studies they have finally considered for their review. This is how you have to create your flow diagram. Simply you just refer already published SLR paper, you will get this logic. And at young age, without understanding statistics and everything, in your first year of PhD duration or second year itself, there is a high possibility that you can write SLR paper. In most of the premier business schools, including IIMs and IITs, they have set a target. If you want to go for proposal submission, you have to make a presentation based on systematic literature review. Further, you can also publish that particular work in some of the reputed journal, so that your publication mandatory class will be over within 2 years of your PhD duration. So we are also following the same strategy, but out of 20 students, hardly 2 or 3 are able to publish a systematic review paper.
To examine the relationship between age, which is measured in number of years, and salary, which is measured as low, medium, high. Okay, just take about 20 seconds, and you have 4 options. So if you want, I can circulate the link where you can answer this, but still you can call out the answers if you want.
Should I say so?
Pardon?
Chi-square.
Chi-square, okay. Good. Do we have a call up mic? No problem. Chi-square, okay. Others? No, just feel free. See, today we are in a classroom setting. When we are in a classroom setting, we should actively participate, learn. See, classroom is the only place where we can make many mistakes. So, you just heard Dr. Murugan. So, how is he? I mean, how do you rate him on a scale of 1 to 5? 4.9. So he is the best resource available today in School of Management Studies, University of Hyderabad. I am a senior colleague, he is an assistant professor. I am associate professor. I am 15 years older to him. So morning, say 2 hours he was teaching me something. I was sitting with him, he has been using a PPT, he is asking me questions, only 1-to-1. Morning, just this morning, today morning, 10 to 12:30, he took a class for me, then he came here. So as teachers, we have this luxury of sitting in the classroom making so many mistakes. So please don't feel hesitant. Just tell me what are your options. I got only one answer called chi-square. There are 4 answers, right? You can take one. Because this is an interesting question. I asked this question this is one of the favorite topics that I take in capacity building programs for faculty and research scholars. So whenever I teach this topic starts with this question. So you will be able to relate to this later. For time being, you can just choose one answer. So, correlation, very good. Yeah, others just speak out some answer, yeah.
See, it need not be the correct or wrong.
Yeah.
Any answer.
Definitely, I am telling you, you are not going to tell me the correct answer. I am telling you that. So now you can take chance. Any answer you tell is going to be not correct. So just tell some answer. Huh? Correlation, very good. Correlation, chi-square. Correlation, very good. Then of course without, in the interest of the time, otherwise I don't want to go on quizzing you. So some of you might tell regression. Nobody is saying that. But the correct answer is none of the above. So correct answer is none of the above. So that proves a point that this session is going to be interesting. So we will see why this is the correct answer, why the remaining 3 are wrong answers, and how we will end up in trouble, and what kind of a trouble in the research process, and what precautions you should take to overcome this. So that is the basic agenda of this session. So I am not going to teach you one technique, but I am going to teach you a technique of selecting these techniques. Okay. Now, having known that none of the above is the correct answer, now you tell me why none of the above is the right answer. Now we know the answer, we need to just reason out. So this is a easier task than answering the question itself. Madam? Than the previous one. So now we know the answer, but we have to tell why that is the right answer. Yes, madam?
So it couldn't be chi-square because it's measuring relationship
Yeah.
But sir, then we have special relationships as well, right? So in that, the problem fits well, no?
We will come to that. We will discuss that. So this is called realization. Right? So she immediately realized.
She negated her own.
Yeah. See, after she has known the answer, she realized. So what I want all of you to do is some realization today at the end of this session, not about a question, but about your entire research process. Where you go wrong is what we will discuss today. Okay. Now, the 3 answers are wrong because the choice of a statistical technique fundamentally depends on the level of measurement of the variable. Something that is never taught in our research methodology classes by most of our teachers. They think it might be too preliminary a concept to be taught. But this is the most widely made mistake in research. So I have experience of guiding research for about 15 years. I know, but I ensure that whoever comes to me at the beginning shouldn't get into this trap. But most of the scholars who approach me for help 3-4 years into their research, I see this is the problem. Now we'll connect this to our research design as we go forward. So just to quickly answer this question, in order that you use a technique called correlation, the basic requirement is that both the variables should be measured on a numerical scale. You should have both the variables, right, shown as or seen as numbers. But one of the variables here is not a number, it is just a category. So we rule out correlation now. We understand now why we should not use correlation in this context. Then same, regression is an extension of the correlation. So if you can't do correlation, you cannot do regression. So regression is ruled out. Then why is that chi-square is ruled out here? Because chi-square requires, when you are planning to test the association between 2 variables, both the variables should have been categorical. But one of the variables is a number here. It is numerical. Right? So this will connect back later, the essence of this question. So I'll take you through a little more formal presentation. But of course, my way of teaching is I'll be asking you more questions than giving you answers. Okay? So, this is the definition in the dictionary for research. So the research has basically 4 components. It has to be a systematic investigation. So we read about it, we learn about it, we write about it in the pre-PhD examination. But out of these 2 words, we miss out one word. What is the word that we miss out? Systematic. We only do investigation, we forget about systematic investigation. Okay. Then you use materials and sources to do this, right from your literature review to references, etc. Sometimes you establish facts, right? Sometimes you verify facts. Sometimes you reject the existing theory. Then at times you also derive new conclusions. Right? This is what happens in research. Put operationally, this is what it means. So systematic investigation means it's a process, it's not a single activity. So you have to be more careful in actually taking up, right, this activity. And there are well-defined steps, and you have to use scientific tools, etc., etc. Then the materials and sources can be existing literature, existing data. You create data out of it. Then you establish facts, that you unearth the relationships, causes and effects will be established, and you draw new conclusions. So I'll be sharing this PPT with madam. You can take a copy of it, so no need to take any notes down. Okay. This is my favorite slide. The 9-step research process. So different textbooks, different books, different people give you different levels of the steps. But these are my favorite steps. Just have a look at these 9 steps carefully for 10 seconds. Quote unquote, I am saying carefully, then I'll ask you a question later. It's a very simple chronological process. You start from a research topic, then you identify your research questions, then you specify the objectives, you state the hypothesis, then you will have to know your data requirements, then have a data analysis plan, right? You collect the data, analyze the data, write the report. Simple enough, right? It's a very, any damn textbook will give you this. And now here comes the question. Out of these 9 steps, up to which step is the plan and what steps come under execution? This again very simple. There is the answer is there in the slide. Huh? Isn't it? I've used verbs. Up to 6th one is a plan, after that is the execution. Right? It's not rocket science. So, let us say you have 48 months for doing your PhD. Generally, 12 into 4 years. I am just taking average. 4 years you should be finishing your PhD. So, in which of the months do you start data collection? Are you clear? Some of you are into 12 months of your PhD, some of you may be 24 months, some of you might be just now you are starting. I don't know the composition of the class, but as a general question, if I have 48 months to complete my PhD or do my PhD, in which month you will start collecting data? Wild guess, whatever you think is right, you tell me. 30th month, 30, okay? Very good. Others? No, I'm just telling you, generally you can, based on your knowledge, whatever assumptions you have, if I need, I'll ask you to explain. Otherwise, what is your answer?
It's been almost 1.5 years, sir. No, I've already started.
You already started data collection. So, roughly I would say you started in the 15th month,
Yes.
12th month or maybe 13th month. Okay.
13.
Very good. Next. See, here I am not giving you right answers and wrong answers. Please try to, don't misunderstand me. I am just presenting you one approach. So, you like the approach, you follow it. You don't like the approach, you discard it. I am telling you, in my opinion, how it has to be done. And I am telling you, in my opinion, what mistakes you make. So, if you are not making those mistakes, I am very happy. If you are making those mistakes, again I am very happy because you are knowing what mistakes you are making. If you are starting, I am happy because you know what mistakes you will make. So, it doesn't matter. If you already made that mistakes, now you know how to correct them. Is it clear? So, there are no right answers, no wrong answers. Please feel free, interact. I am only telling what I feel is correct. That need not be correct for everybody. Right? You may disagree with me, no problem. But I will try to defend what I am saying. If you take the defense as, reasonably good, you can follow, otherwise you can leave it. Okay. So, we have got some answers. 12 is one answer, 33 is one answer. Yeah, I got the point. See, depending on the discipline, it may this 40, 80, 8 may vary here and there, but you will be able to take a call. But I request you to just try to appreciate the essence of what I am trying to say. Right? I got your point, madam. Now, this 48 is my answer. 40 and 40th month and 8th month. In fact, if I am I used to be radical. I used to say 44 and 4. 44 and 4. Now I trimmed it down to 40 and 8 because people are thinking I am joking. Right? So, now what is the essence of this? There is a quote by Abraham Lincoln. If I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend 6 hours sharpening my axe. And this exactly fits into what we are speaking today. Online teaching and quantity delivered through online teaching and delivery quality, online teaching and student engagement, online teaching and online evaluation. Are you getting the idea now? First I have taken one topic called online teaching. Now what I have done, I have now 4 topics with me within that broad domain called online teaching. And I have taken work from home, and within work from home I have listed 4 topics. So if you do little more thinking, you can list down 10 more this side, 10 more that side. Yes or no? Right. Now let's go forward. You identify the research questions. So what research questions can be asked? If you just take work from home, under that if you take work from home and productivity, can I ask this question, does work from home affects the work productivity? Or is it just as usual? Whether you go to office and work, whether you sit at home and work, will you have the same productivity? That's a very fundamental question. Work from home and health. Does work from home reduces physical health? Will it increases mental stress? Right? Whether it affects something very specific like one's memory. When I start working from home, will my memory increase or will it decrease? Memory, I just quote unquote thrown one example there. So like memory, you can have so many concepts that will come and fit in there. Right? So then, does work from home constrains interpersonal relations? Will I become acting weird after I started working from home? How am I behaving with my friends? How am I behaving with my family? Is there a difference after I started working from home? Yeah. No, please don't feel. Please tell me.
So whenever we go to such things, always one thing comes into my mind. Does this idea works for a PhD thesis or only for a research paper?
Very good. We'll answer that. Okay. Right? So similarly, does work from home hinders teamwork? Will it affect the team coordination? Or what shall be the new challenges for team leads managing team members working from homes? Now we see here the detail in each of the questions, the way they are asked. Somewhere it is very open, somewhere it is very specific, somewhere it is very detailed. I'll come to that part later. So once you have decided work from home, then once you have decided work from home and what you call teamwork, there you have then 3 or 4 questions. Similarly, if it is online teaching, let's say online and quantity delivered. Does quantity of content delivered differ in online teaching compared to offline teaching? So will I be able to teach 3 credit course in 30 sessions in online if I am already doing it in offline? Or do I require more time? Or will I be able to deliver more content? Right? Then what factors affect the quantity of content delivery in online teaching? Right? What are different ways in which content can be delivered? You can have an endless questions. Okay. Similarly, delivery quality, you can have whether quality differs in online teaching. What factors affect delivery of quality in online teaching? I want you to concentrate. The way I am asking these questions have repercussions later. Right? So some of them are open-ended, some of them are closed, some of them are very specific. We'll see them later. So I can go with student engagement with all those questions. So can student be as effectively / more effectively engaged in online teaching? Right? Then what factors affect student engagement in online teaching? What are different ways of engaging students online? Whatever the relevant questions that I take forward, I'll display them again. So you need not take it down. I'll share this complete set of slides with madam. She will pass it on. Huh? So how does different student engagement methods compare with each other? And the pointer here is the way you are asking this question is going to influence rest of your process. But at this juncture, I am not sure which question I am going to actually pick up throughout the journey. We'll see where I'll drop some questions, where I'll have to pick up some questions, and what will force me to pick some or drop some, etc., etc. So then can evaluation online be as effective as offline, etc.? Then I get into specification of objectives. And this is what we are doing. This is the important slide. I started with a very broad topic. Then I'll narrow it down to, let's say if it is work from home, few areas like work productivity, health, etc., teamwork, leadership. There could have been 100 other issues related to work from home. Then when I came with each of these questions, then I had little pointed, little narrowed down questions. So what I am doing in this journey so far and what I will have to do continuously is I am moving from very broad nature of the topic, subtopic to a little more narrowed down topic or question. I am talking subjective when I started. Now we are moving little objective. So we are moving from general to specific. Then noticeable things to measurable things. This is where the whole research starts. So I might want to answer any question under the sun. But in research, if you are not able to measure, you cannot answer it. So the measurement is what is going to decide how many of these questions are going to be there and what kind of questions are going to be retained. Okay, so far clear what we are doing? Right. Now, if you go forward, you have the questions here on the left panel and you have the objectives on the right panel. Just spend about few seconds, you would understand what we are meaning. We are trying to rephrase it, right? So it is in the form of a question on the left panel. Now we are putting it in the form of an objective by doing a little jiggler of English, right? And then we are trying to state them as little more specific. Little more specific. So I might want to study the dynamics of quantity of content delivered in online teaching. So what kind of objective is this? Is it more general, more specific, more exploratory, more descriptive? It's a completely open-ended objective. I just wanted to study dynamics of, right, quantity delivered. I'm keeping it completely open. I want to identify, I want to explore what factors influence, right, the quantity delivered in online teaching. This is more explorative in nature, right? Then study the factors affecting quantity of content delivered in online teaching. Now, from dynamics to factors affecting, I am little more specific. Dynamics can be anything. I can do essays on that. But when I say factors, I have to identify the constructs. I have to give them a name. I should pinpoint them. These are the things that affect the online teaching. Then to study the different ways in which content can be, this is little more specific. This is little more specific. I am only coming to different ways. When I say dynamics, there are 100 things. Broad. The quality of the teacher, the quality of the internet connection, whether the person has a personal laptop at home or not, where he is living in rural or urban conditions. It's very, very broad. To the third objective, I am only concentrating on the different ways in which the quantity can be delivered online. Are you understanding? Just changing the words here and there, they define the scope of what you have to do. Right? If you want to be little more specific within this, just compare these questions. Now I am asking a pointed question to study whether the same quantity of content can be delivered online as is delivered offline. If I am doing 3 credits in 30 hours, can I deliver 3 credits in 30 hours or not? That's a very simple, straightforward question. I don't want to look at dynamics, factors, etc., etc., etc. This is a pointed question, I need a pointed answer. Then, to study the impact of XYZ factors, instead of making it open-ended, now I want to study XYZ. 3 factors that I want to study, I am identifying. So when I say factors affecting, I will make a big list of that. Then, to study the effectiveness of A, B, C, D ways. So now, remember our travel from more general to more specific, more broad to more narrowed approach. So this is what you have to do as you are journeying from your topic to subtopic to research questions to research objectives. As we go forward, we need to become little more narrower, little more specific. You will see that transition happening in the slides. Okay? So, then here, of course, you would have done an assignment, not possible now. I have just skipped it. I will be sharing this because we don't have time. Now, I am following it with the more specific objectives that I have to study whether the same quantity of content be delivered online as is delivered offline. Now, we look at the hypothesis. What is the hypothesis? The same quantity of content can be delivered online, right, as is delivered offline. So, hypothesis is an expected result of your study, or what you assume is true, or what you assume holds good or not holds good. The hypothesis also can be what you assume not holds good, right? Look at the down. Compared to the first hypothesis, a more and more specific hypothesis is taking a side. Taking a side. Now I take a side that the same quantity, only less than the quantity can be delivered. And the way you are wording it is going to have an effect on how we are to measure it. We will see that later. So instead of saying XYZ factors have no impact on the quantity of content delivered in online teaching, I say X do not have an impact. X do not have a impact. That means teachers' qualification do not have an impact on the quantity delivered in online teaching. Teachers' experience do not have an impact on quantity delivered in online teaching. If my data research proves otherwise, let it be. This is a hypothesis that I want to test. Okay? And method A is not effective way of delivering teaching, delivering quantity online. Right? So now we have seen how the hypotheses have to be made more and more specific. I'll go to the important part of this. Once you have the hypothesis, I'll skip this. So now I am restricting it to only student engagement. I am restricting it to only student engagement. The student engagement is less in online teaching. Let us say this is my hypothesis. So what are the variables that you need to test this hypothesis? Now you have understood how we have come to hypothesis level. Let us say we pick up the specific hypothesis called the student engagement is less in online teaching. I want to test this. So what variables I need to measure here? So I should know what is the level of student engagement in offline teaching and what is the level of student engagement in online teaching. Let's say I have designed a questionnaire. So I have measured student engagement with the students who are in offline and student engagement with students who are in online. Let us say the average engagement in offline is 60%. The average engagement in online is 55%. So what do you conclude? Student engagement in offline is 60%. Student engagement in online is 55%. These are my results. What do you conclude? Do you support this first? Do you support this hypothesis? The student engagement is less in online teaching? Sure? That's simple. Yeah. This just by comparing averages, you are not going to conclude. You need to do a statistical test. Right? Just measuring student engagement in offline, measuring student online, 60% and 55%, you are saying it is less. Now if I make it 68% and 58%, do you still say it is less? 60% and 55% you say less. Yes or no? 60% and 58% is my data's results. So do you conclude the same now? So is 2% a significant difference? Is 5% a significant difference? We do not know. In some cases, 5% may not be a significant difference. That means even if there is 5% difference, we conclude both are same. In some cases. In some cases, 2% itself might be a significant difference. Even if there is 2% less, we say they are different. This is less. In some cases, even if it is 5% less, it's okay. They are same. Yes or no? So who has to decide whether this difference is significant to conclude that the engagement in online is really less? It is statistics. It is a test. It's not we. So what a test does here is, it will rule out whether this difference is happening due to a chance or it is happening because they are really different. So the statistics will rule out that portion of difference that might arise just because of chance. Though they are same, this difference might come. Are you understanding? So what is the quantity or size of the difference? We do not know. Sometimes 5% may be less, sometimes 2% may be more. We'll come to that later. Now, the mother's education impacts the student engagement in online teaching. What variable you need? You need to measure mother's engagement, mother's education, mother of the child, her education. We are theorizing. If the mothers are educated, right, then they ensure the student will be engaged even if they are in an online class. It's just an assumption. If they are not educated, they might not even know the difference that online offline. Or in place of mother's education, you can say the working status of the mother. Maybe if she is a homemaker, here it is reverse. Here the assumption is if it is a homemaker, she keep an eye on him and she will ensure he is sitting in the class. If the mother is working, there is no way she controls him. So in the place of mother's education, you can bring in a construct called work profile of the mother. Is it clear? So now to do this, I need the above two variables as well as mother's education. This is the question. Most important slide is this. Now when I am saying level of student engagement, you can measure it as engaged, not engaged. That option is there. Or you can measure it as an engagement score out of 5 using a scale. So when I am measuring it as first one, then it's a categorical variable. Measuring it as a first one, it is a categorical variable. When I am measuring it as a second option, it becomes a numerical variable. Agreed? Yes or no? Now, mother's education. You can just classify as literate or illiterate. There might be published data of mother's education through what you call the statistics, national sample survey. Or you might come out with a reasoning. If she has passed 10th or more, you might want to classify as educated. If she has not cleared 10th, say she is not educated. Now this is your own scheme, right? Alternatively, you can take number of years of education. So mother who has put in through 11th standard, she is having 11 years of education. Mothers who have put in, who are graduates, can be taken as having 15 years of education. This is the most important neglected time spent on the research. We just very casually decide that question. If we were to measure mother's education, we very casually decide one, two or three of these options. This will have ramifications going forward. What is the next step? You have a data analysis
Even the
plan.
question also can be expanded because it is
Madam?
also- even the question also, it's not only the mother, father also can.
Yeah, that becomes another variable.
That also variable.
Yeah, that's another. I am just taking mother as an example here. It applies to a father also. I only have a measurement that students are engaged, not engaged in offline. The same data I have in online also, engaged or not engaged. What test you can do? We have answered it in the first slide. You can do a chi-square. You can do a chi-square. But if one is numerical and other is categorical, this is where you get stuck. There is no way forward. There is no way forward. Similarly, the mother's education and student engagement, if both variables are numerical, you do a correlation. If both variables are categorical, you do a chi-square, right? If the mother's education is categorical and engagement is numerical, what will you do? And the other way around, what will you do? See, if the engagement is numerical, education is categorical, I can answer this question. Whether the level of student engagement is same in both the groups, educated mothers versus non-educated mothers. Right? Yes or no? Will it make some sense? I mean, the students who are in the educated mothers group and the students who are in the non-educated mothers group, whether both of them have same level of engagement. Whether both of them have same level of engagement. Let us say you have done it the reverse. The mother's education has been numerical, but engagement has been categorical. What is the question you are answering? Whether the level of mother's education same in both the groups, engaged versus non-engaged students. Does it make sense? It doesn't make any sense. Yes, sir. This is not what my research wanted to answer. You see where you have landed. See, here I am trying to answer a question whether mother's education is same while students are engaged or not engaged. So, whether mother's education depends on engaged versus not engaged students? It has no, it's absurd. It is absurd. The answer to this question is meaningless. But statistically you can answer this. Statistically you can answer this because statistics doesn't know what is mother engagement, it neither knows what is student engagement.
But that's not going to add the value to that specific.
No, it's entirely Completely I am into a glutter now. Now, this is the kind of things that will land up if we do not plan this measurement correctly. Right? So, I will not take much time because I am not here to teach you. Now, this is the question I wanted to ask you. I was thinking that one of you will ask me, in these 9 steps, where is literature review? I told you in the very beginning, you carefully go through the 9 steps. I will ask you a question. So, have you noticed that I have not mentioned literature review as one of the steps? In fact, where is literature review?
Yes, I did notice that, but I thought that in step 2 you are asking us to identify the first question.
Okay. So,
And that,
no offense, I am just trying to kid you. Now, my answer is, what is my answer? Can you expect?
I guess it will say that the entire
Yeah.
research will be based on the literature review, because every
Literature review is there in all 9 steps. Contrary to our feeling, we do literature review before we come up with either research questions or objectives. Now, what do I mean when I say this? What do I mean when I say this? I just have 2-3 slides to go, we will close. So, I am sorry, I think we are running out of time, or are we on time? Yeah. Now, when I say literature review is there in every step, what do I exactly mean by this? You see this? These are the 6 steps in the plan. It is very usual that you go back from one step to the previous step. And it should happen. When you are actually knowing your data requirements, you suddenly realize such data is not available, such data cannot be obtained. Then what you have to do? You go back and change your hypothesis. You have to go back and change your. Now, because if you can't collect data, you can't answer that hypothesis. So, it is very logical to believe that in every step there is a possibility that I have to go back to the previous step.
It's always we revisit, then at the time of vetting we come to know like we have to read over.
Yes, madam. So, now what I am saying is, whenever in 6th step, you suddenly realize you have to go to your 5th step. And this is nothing wrong, and you have to do it consciously. You have to do it consciously. But that's not the story. This is the story. Every time you go back, you may not go back to the immediate next step. Sometimes, whenever in the 6th step, you suddenly realize this topic is not going to work. While you go back from 6th step to 4th step, or from 6th step to 2nd step, while coming forward, you have to come one step at a time. Please remember this.
It so happens sometimes like we think like these are the main objectives. In the course of time, action research happens simultaneously for us. So when we revisit our things, then all of a sudden we realize like the main objective that we are working is not the main objective.
Exactly, madam. That's exactly.
And we come back to something which is, we have done a lot of work which is not considered as an objective.
Yes.
Then we redefine the objective stating like.
Exactly, madam. Exactly. This is what I wanted to deliver in this class. This going back to previous steps is always based on the literature. At every step I am doing the literature review. When I am doing what data analysis I need, I am referring to literature. What data analysis is available. When I know what kind of data requirements are there, I am available, I am looking into the literature, what kind of data is available, how this data was collected, right? Then when I stating hypothesis, I am again looking into the literature, what hypotheses were already tested. When I am specifying my objectives, again I am looking into the literature, whether these objectives have already been answered. So, at every stage of your research process, literature review is there. Okay. So, while going back is a very, very common thing, And as a matter of fact, to refine your process, to strengthen your design, to make it foolproof, you have to go back. You have to go back. But the unfortunate thing is, from 7th step to 6th step, you can't go back. After you collected your data, can you go back and change your analysis plan? It is like testing whether mother's education is different in engaged versus non-engaged group. So mother's education happened long back. Now because the student is engaged or not engaged, is it going to change? It will not change. Right? So from after you collected the data, you can't go back. You can't go back and change your objective. You can't go back and change your, if at all you do, you will land up in this kind of objectives. That is the reason why the data collection is the last but one step. So whatever plan you do, whatever design you do, whatever precaution you have to take, all these things you have to run, rerun before you start collecting data. Once you start collecting data, out of these 9 steps, the one step that cannot be repeated is data collection. So if a situation comes, you collected data of 350 people, and suddenly you realize this data is not fitting, answering your objective, or you don't have an analysis to do. So will you throw away this data and do that again? It's impossible. It's almost not possible. Right? That's what I meant. The data collection, except for the period which it takes depending on the problem, you should start it after you have frozen your research design. That means before you collect data, you should have a plan of what you are going to do with that data. Before you collect data, you should have a plan of what you are going to do with that data. So you should start collecting data after you have written your hypothesis, after you have identified in each hypothesis what are the variables, after you have identified how we are going to measure those variables, after you have identified what statistical test you are going to run to test the hypothesis. If variables and their measurement is not supporting employing of a test, that you would know there itself. I am measuring mother's education like this, right, and student engagement like this. So what test I am going to use? Then I realize I can't use any test. There is no test available for this. So let me not go for measurement like this. Let me change my measurement plan. Let us say with respect to mother's education, I don't have data availability. Then let me go for father's education. Are you understanding what I am saying? Let me change my variables. Let me change my hypothesis. Let me change my objectives. Let me change my research questions. But anything you do before you collect data. Once you are going for data collection, you have to freeze the whole thing, right? And that's where this quote we remember once again. The execution is just executing what you have planned. So your execution or quality of your execution is as good as the quality of your plan. So we have to spend the most of the time here. And once you have a very good plan, its execution is a simple matter of fact. I think I'll stop here. Maybe I'll take some questions if you have related to this or not related to this also. I think anyway, the next slide is questions only.
So,
Yeah.
what should we do if a student comes with that kind of a problem which cannot be solved? Like one variable.
Just to see, I remember once one professor called me. He's a senior. He was my professor actually. He called me. We have a situation. I went to his home. Then he's sitting with a file where the student has studied something about bank mergers, etc. So there were 30 questions. All questions are yes or no. Then he said, what to do with it? I said, nothing can be done with it. No, he has already collected data. Yeah, he has already collected data, but you can do only a chi-square with it. Now, will university accept? All these questions should be asked before collecting the data.
Choosing a question and keeping the variable as per the requirement is the basic unit for the data.
Yes, madam. Yes.
And one more thing I want to add, sir, because we come from the language, ELT, English language teaching, and English as second language, ESL also, we apply this
Okay.
variable specifically to know from Telugu medium to English medium. What is the mother tongue influence?
Okay.
English as a second language. And this is one of the best options that we adopt, but a pilot project will be with only 60 students. Then we can go up to the maximum level of
True.
300 to 400. Yeah, just because the hands are,
Yeah.
just want to
Sure.
get
Yeah.
to my students.
So just to answer her question, there is something called data transformation. Very limited options are available where in certain cases you can convert your categorical data into numerical data, but it comes with a cost. Say for example, I have let's say 3 categories of people who are satisfied, moderately satisfied and not satisfied. Now somehow I want this to be a numerical data. Then I will take a scale of 1 to 5. Then who are all satisfied, I will give them 4. Who are all not satisfied, I give them 2 or 1 or 0. Or who are moderately satisfied, I give them 3. So technically, I will be able to run it. But what is the validity of assigning these numbers to those categories is a question. So your results are as good as your logic of assigning these numbers. So these kind of shortcuts are there. But then if they were not to be agreed by the examiners in total, then we are in soup. So somehow something can be done. Whether it is actually adding value to the literature is a bigger question, right? So even if it is not adding value to the literature, it is fine, but it should not become absurd. To that extent, we should take care. Okay? So I can't solve all your problems. My only caution to all of you, one big caution through this class is, you be very, very, very careful, do all iterations, have dummy data and do your analysis before you collect data. That is the single line that I want all of you to take home. Right? You spend time redoing this process. Once you are satisfied, you want to show it to few people, you do it all this before you collect data. Yes, madam.
Most of the interesting questions don't have any data as such. And another thing is, should we always try to fix the data availability first before going for a plan, which I find somewhat uninteresting?
No, madam. See, when we see a PhD presentation, in the end, there will be a class slide called limitations. So one of the important limitations mentioned is time. Some people say, because of time, I did not answer this question. I did not do that. Then immediate question is, who asked you to do this research? If you don't have time, you would have sat at home. The lighter way of putting it is, a question has to be answered. But the question is answered with some limitations always. If the limitations are dominating the answer, then the answer has no value. I cannot quote time as a limitation and say I have not answered this question fully. Same applies to data also. If the questions do not have data, we might answer it with limited data, but the validity of that answer is also limited. So the quality of the data determines the quality of the answer. The quality of the question is always same. The data will not change the question or quality of the question. But what is the quality of the answer depends on the quality of data, quality of analysis. So sometimes you might have data, but you might apply a wrong analysis. See, unfortunately, today we have a lot of statistical packages, which is garbage in, garbage out. Right?
We cannot predetermine the quality of data.
No, that's what I am saying. You need to have an assessment of, to answer this question, will I be able to get data? And will I be able to get full data? Will I be able to get quality data? These questions you have to answer before you take up that question. If you are of the opinion the data is not going to be adequate, data is not going to be of quality, to answer this question, better not take up that question.
How does new research emerge?
No, that's what. When I am in doubt about the answer, why to answer that question? Right? See, for example, the quality of our software is like this. For example, you are having in a particular questionnaire, whether somebody is male or female, and you coded it as 1 and 2. 1 for male, 2 for female. So if you put it in SPSS and do a descriptive, so the average gender will be 1.5, which is absurd. But SPSS doesn't know it. It is you who should know that I can't do an average for male and female. Right? So here the quality of data is good. This fellow has collected the data correctly. He has identified male or female. Male he has assigned 1, female he has assigned 2. So quality of the data is good, but the quality of analysis is poor. Okay. Any other questions?
In my experience, I am working in the GRCR&D.
Yeah, sir.
So from the institute I am working in Center for Evaluation. So if you not get any answer, the same question repeats somewhere else.
Yes.
So in different ways. So then you correct the answer.
Yeah.
That's what I am saying.
100%, sir. 100%. We may not be the only one who is answering this question. There may be others who would have answered already. If you do not do a proper, see, we also see this common statement in our literature review. At the end of the literature review, when you are identifying the gap, there are no studies in this area. So how are you concluding that there are no studies in this area? It depends on what is your source of search. I can't just search Usman University Library and say that there are no studies in this area.
Professor, it was former honorary professor in the Center for Digital Learning, Training and Resources, and the professor in Head Department of Anthropology and Head Department of Education Technology and School of Social Sciences, University of Hyderabad, and PhD in Anthropology from University of Mysore.
Identifying the research problem becomes most important one for developing a research project, because research project is a little larger than the research identifying research problem. And first of all, what are important is one is what are the attributes of a good research topic, because that's what we need to identify. And how do we generate the ideas? Because those ideas that you generate helps us in selecting a suitable topic. That means because everybody has their own kind of way of probing things, way of identifying, way of fixing up onto a topic, so that one has persistent interest. That is important, because sometimes what happens is we keep fluctuating. We decide on one topic, after some time somebody else says something else, you will see told. And then after that, again you say, no, this is not good, I will change it. So this kind of vacillation happens in the beginning. That is where we must try and identify which is the one which is most interesting to us. And because there's nothing like a topic which has no value to understand. For example, there are people who have worked on flowers, the role of flowers. Jack Goody, one of the very well-known anthropologists or sociologists, has worked on culture of flowers. And we all will think similarly, taking a meal on different occasions, by looking at the way in which it is served, you can understand whether it is a sad occasion or happy occasion, what kind of this thing is. So there are different ways of looking at any aspect that you would like to probe and understand. So looking at a research topic, we must understand what are the important aspects that I can probe. That's one thing. That's where identifying the attributes become an important aspect. Next is to generate ideas. And once you have ideas, how to turn the ideas into research questions and turn them into research objectives. So then comes your writing your research proposal. So these are the kinds of things are important steps in formulating a research topic. First thing is, how do we select a research topic? Selecting a research topic is the first step and most important step in any research. This is where I said initially what happens is we keep on changing because we think that some other topic will be better than this. After some working for some time, we change over. So that is because you have not really tried to look at a problem and understand the problem deeply so that you know that problem is the most important one. So for selecting a topic, there is of course, there is nothing like readily available kind of a solutions for that. But if you follow certain steps, it is possible for us to identify or to select most important kind of things that you want to do, or what is a good topic that for researching it can be done, because there is a procedure that you need to do. It's not something that it happens. Somebody suddenly I got a dream and I found something and all that. Nothing of the sort happens in research. So, which means that we start with different ways of doing it. One is you skim the literature, and sometimes you, for example, if you have a quick visit to a place where you wanted to do something, get some ideas, talk to people, and then what you are thinking of, whether it is working or not, you can get ideas. That is where we also do some kind of, I don't say it is a survey, even pilot studies sometimes are used, but it is more like going and exploring of the ideas that you have, whether they are workable or not. And that is one way of doing it. Another way is thoroughly looking at the literature. And once you look at the literature, then you know what are the different kind of issues that you need to look at for probing into a topic. That is where identifying a range of possible interesting topics. That is, you also see that what are the current interests in the subject, or what are the kinds of research that is going on in the subject, or in the area that you want to work on. And that is where you get a range of this thing. Then you say which is most interesting and most important to be looked at, you would like to do that. That's where research starts with literature survey or skimming the literature. Now, when we try to select the topic, this is what I said, we should not be vacillating. If you start vacillating, which one to take, which one not to take, that vacillation will not be there if you skim through the literature and then identify a range of topics and also the kind of current interest. Then you know which is the one which sustains your interest for a longer period of time. So that is where you need to select a topic where you have a sustained interest. And sustained interest it means that you can work for a longer period of time on that area. And also, most of the time what happens is when we start our work, we become very ambitious because we would like to do everything that's available. It happened with me. In fact, when I gave my research proposal in a thematic diagram to my teacher, he said, Shiv Prasad, we will have a meeting with a couple of others who are also involved in this. I said, fine, sir. We went there. He called another very well known in geography, Professor Vilas Prakash. He is also no more. He was there and a couple of others were there. He said, first introduction my teacher told him is, Shiv Prasad is highly ambitious. he wants to do all this. If he does even 1/10 of it, it will make a good thesis. Which means, be practical, don't try to cover everything in the world. It's not possible. Even if a research, larger kind of research project, we cannot do it. If you have a large team of people, because we do surveys for 10 states, 15 states and all that, even there is something you can do, something you cannot do. We must understand that. So let us not be very ambitious. That means that you have to be practical. What you can do, what you cannot do, you should be clear. That, in other words, in a given time, what is it that I can manage to do it? If you are doing that, you should also make a mark in that. It's not that we are doing research just for the sake of it. Not getting a degree or something, that's a different ball game altogether. But if you are doing a research, tomorrow somebody else should say, in this area you must go and talk to so-and-so. That kind of a thing happens only when you have a meticulous kind of a plan. So avoid topics which are also closely linked to our emotional kind of thing. Because we want to do something, want to prove it. In research, you have to be objective. So if you are personally involved, the questions of objectivity, questions of honesty comes there. Because you have biases. If I am interested in only one thing to prove, I will only collect and say something which is to be proved. Which, if it goes against some of the things which are there, we will ignore that. That's not research. That happens in politics, not in research. Because in politics, we select, if I am jumping one party to another party, I will say, no, yesterday I said that, but that's wrong, which is what it is. That is not what research is. Because it has to be objective and honesty, and that is where avoid as far as possible. If you are having any kind of emotional issues in your own life, don't try to get into those issues to be proved. You can have some insights, but that should not become the main part of our research, because the bias is something we must not get into. As far as possible, in any kind of research, it's not that we can eliminate bias 100%. Bias exists, but we must make an attempt to minimize the bias to as much as possible. So that is why one of the sources of biases is if I have emotional issues with which I am working on. So I wanted to say, so if, for example, on issues of this thing, some religious kind of this thing I am working on. I would like to say some other religious kind of things are like this religious kind of stuff like this, which is not what we do. Because I already have an opinion. I have a personal kind of these things, access to ground. Then that's not research. So avoid such kind of things. And also, in any research, we always begin with some hunch. It begins with that. So it's better to start with some hunch. These are the kinds of things happening. Others we have looked at like this, but they have not looked at from this angle. Why not I look at that? That is a hunch we start with. In fact, there is one of the well-known established anthropologists, Edmund Leach. He says that generalization and comparison are two different things. If people say through comparison I can arrive at generalization, he says that's not correct. Because by comparison, for example, if I am comparing a set of butterflies, I am only comparing them based on their pigments, based on their wings or size and all that. But I cannot say butterflies of this kind or like this, like that. I cannot do that. Comparison brings in only classification, categorization, but not generalization. Generalization is a different kind of an activity. That is, you start with a hunch, and if you succeed in that hunch, you discover things. If you fail, He says nothing, nothing wrong, you start again. So because this is exactly what in any science that happens, because you go with certain hunch, you have certain evidences, you start with that, and if you find something not different, and you change that. So that is where we find the kind of comparison is a different activity. It's also a research activity, but the kind of insight that you can get are only through this kind of generalizations are possible only with this kind of a work. That is, you have a hunch, you start with that, and then using that hunch you select a topic, and you think that topic has the potential to contribute, to make an original contribution. So that is one thing that we must, that is, you can, that is possible only when you have a mastery over the subject. That these are the kinds of things that are not done, so let me do it. Now, we all know the way technologies have changed. The artificial intelligence technology, it has to work with the people's ideas, people's different kind of data, because it is something to deal with the behavior. If behavior we are trying to capture, if I am trying to look at that behavior, how I can change or I can even influence others, like what's happening with your fake news and other kinds of things which are spread, using the same ideas. If somebody is working on that, I say, I can break the market and make use money. One uses that in marketing ideas and all that. So in other words, when you are selecting a topic which has a potential to make an original contribution, and that is where you are trying to demonstrate your mastery over the subject and also the method. So the study should generate or it should help in validating certain theoretical understandings in the area that we are doing. So why we need to validate a theoretical understanding? Because theory gives us those kind of hunches for us. Through theory, we draw certain hunches, we are trying to test them, and if we establish that, theory gets established. If you prove that things to be wrong, then you alter the theory, you develop a new theory. So theory helps us, this is a dialectic between theory and the data. So theory helps us to interpret the data that we have. At the same time, whether what we found is really true or valid with the theory, we can establish that. That is where when we are trying to look at this, we are trying to say, there are, for example, you find contradictions in the review of literature. Somebody is talking one thing, another person is talking something opposite. So how it is possible? He says these are the kinds of things are not taken, these are the things are taken, this is what happens. Then what happens is you should not get worried about those contradictions in the literature review. And that itself, the contradiction itself, provides the opportunity, because we are trying to resolve that conflict. And if you do that, then you are trying to discover something new. And that is where it can provide us an opportunity to carry out a more critical study on those issues. So that is one thing that we must keep in mind. So, selecting of any research area itself is dependent on our own specialities, depends on our own interests, depends on our background, scientific subject background, scientific background, and also experience. So first of all, you when you start your work, you settle on a research area. Because my research area is broadly, say, in the area of migration. When I am saying I am selecting migration as my area, which part of migration I would like to look at it. And am I looking at international migrations or local migrations, labor migrations, or I am looking at the economic impacts of migration, whatever that is. Because subject itself becomes very vast. So area you identify, within that area, what is the speciality that you have, what is your special interest, all that you need to identify. So that is where, once you have that, then because all depends on our own interest, our own specializations, our own background of research, all that. And once you have the priority of topic decided, then you come to the characteristics of the problem or the topic that you are choosing. And that is where, it's based on, the characteristics depend on many things. One is on the capability of ours, whether I am capable to carry out. Do I have those kind of attributes? And is that appropriate itself, the topic that I am choosing? Is it feasible? Can I do it within the given time? And is it cost effective? You see, if already is established review of literature says some things, Robert Merton talks about paradigm approach. All the researches some people have already collected and put it in this thing already. You don't need to start it again to invent the wheel. You stop where people have already reviewed and then put it in the kind of thing and then proceed further. We all have ICSR volumes on different areas of research. Some scholars have already put in those kinds of things. So one need not go back beyond unless you find certain doubts about it. Otherwise, you can start somewhere. That is, it saves our time. If you say, no, I want to do it again and all that, then you are wasting a lot of your money and resources and time. So, how effective, cost effective it is, and how acceptable the results would be. That depends on your methodology, that depends on your theoretical and backgrounds. So these are the things that, once you identify the area of research, then the topic, then these questions we have to put to ourselves. And we should also see to it that the research questions are amply made clear and they are very specific, not vague and very broad. And that is one thing, when you are putting your research questions or objectives or your hypothesis should be very clear, no ambiguity in that. And it should reflect the objectives of the study. Objectives are derived based on, again, your literature review, and then you say what are things done, what are not done, what you want to do, you specify and all that. And then, the literature has no answer. When it has no answer for your research questions or the kind of issues that you are raising, you are now trying to find an answer to those questions that you have put in, which are unambiguous, at least to find a solution to the problem that you have selected, it should give way to it. That means you are in a position to talk about what is that you are trying to do, what are the research questions, what are the hypotheses, or what are the kinds of things that you are doing. And then accordingly you choose the solutions for that. Or that means you are to establish and say that this is what I am saying, this is what it is, and people will have to accept that. Because if somebody else does similar study in the same way, they should get similar result. It's not that we get exact result. Even in hard sciences, you won't get exact results. That's why 95.5, something that, what you call confidence level that we give. It is exactly that. So this is where, what I talked about those things, I'm just little elaborately talking about. What are the attributes of a good research topic? First thing what we are talking about is capability. That means whether it is feasible at all is the first question. First of all, we must, convince ourselves, are we fascinated by the topic? And if I am fascinated by it, do I have the necessary research skills to carry it out? If I don't have, I must acquire them. For example, you wanted to do a migration study, some kind of fact analysis or multiple regression or any other kind of things, or even projections. If you have time series data, what would be the trends, etc. For which you need to get certain quantitative kind of skills, statistical or other skills. That means if I need that, I must get those skills. That means these are the necessary skills for me to carry forward. Even if I am using a research assistant to do that, I must know what the person is doing, whether what he is doing or what she is doing, is it exactly what I wanted to test it. So to do that, we must have that capability. In fact, when we were trained in the Institute for Social Economics in Bangalore, we had a statistics professor. He's a brilliant man. He taught us, I left my mathematics in higher secondary. After that, the moment I used to see mathematics or even symbols, I used to see stars. But that is a myth. Once he trained us, he said, he taught probability theory and he taught many of these things. He said, very lay person, even illiterate can understand. He said, in a formula, each one represents something. You put any symbol, anything, doesn't matter to me. But whether you are saying this or that, you must be clear. And then he taught us, he said, you write something, what you have, whether according to probability theory is this. That is different kind of sampling and all that based on the probability. You are trying to control the variations, trying to arrive at homogeneity. And once it is homogeneous, you can do random sampling. So to that what we are doing, we are trying to control number of variations and bring in some kind of homogeneity, so that for our study, we are trying to draw a sample which is appropriate at every levels. That is where you have multi-stage, stratified, random, all kinds of things we talk about. And once he did that, he gave us a sum. This is what, as teachers, we also have to learn something. He said, after giving a sum, we were about 6 persons. And of course, all of them are retired in higher positions, much higher than mine. And some of them are from economics, some are from political science. I am from anthropology, sociology. And he gave us a sum. He said, first class MSc statistics persons, even they may not be able to do it. If you do it, I can say you can get first class MSc statistics. So when he said that, I said, first class MSc statistics I cannot do it. What can I do? I cannot do it. So there is no point in wasting my time on that. I just kept quiet. All of us struggled. Next day class, he asked, everybody asked, suddenly he looked at me. See, a teacher understands whether you have done or not by looking at the face. Because anxiety and other things reflects. He said, sir, show me. He said, sir, I left it in the room. Okay, the room is not very far. You can walk it on. Okay, go and get it. Sir, let us search for it. Then he said, you didn't do it. Yes, sir, I didn't do it. I better accept, otherwise I will have much more trouble. Then I told him, fault is yours, sir, I said. Because you said even MSc Statistics fellow cannot do it. Had you said, you can do it, don't worry about MSc Statistics fellows. If you had said that, I would have done it. I tell you why I am saying this is, after his teaching, I started working on Markov chains. It's a stochastic process. If 3-point data are given, you can predict the fourth. Because I was working on social mobility. I have 3 generational data, 4th gen. I was never into quantitative, but I picked up. I started reading. I have 2 books even today, which I bought and read them. Mathematical Probability by Nedenko and Uspensky, and Probability by Nedenko. They are Russian original scholars. Why I'm saying this is, if you want to get those skills, don't get worried about that. He says all this is possible because once we know what we need, you can approach people. Today it's much more easier with your YouTubes and other things. Online, these things are available. We have to struggle. So that is second one. You must ensure yourself whether you have whether the topic is fascinating to you. If that is the case, do you have the required skills, and can you complete the project, complete your research within the time available to you. Say for example, if you have some projects to be completed within 3 months or 6 months, they will say this is the time or thing we give you finish that. So which means you must plan meticulously. So you must know what are your capabilities, what are your skills, how far you can do, what you cannot do. And then whether you have enough financial and other resources. Financial is if you have a research project for PhD, if you want to say, I want to do 1200 or 1500 sample for 10 villages, you will never be able to complete it. Because first of all, your fellowship may not be enough. If you don't have fellowship, it's much more worse. So that is where you must know what you can do it. It is not necessary you must have a huge sample to do something. It is the logic behind that is important. Once you have a logic, once you ensure this is appropriate sample, because there are methodologies are very clear for us. If I don't have anything, I can take a case study method, an intensive study of a method, particular thing. It can give me insights. So that is where, do I have sufficient financial and other resources? You must be clear. And can you, for example, certain research topics, you want to ambitiously do it. Do you have access to the data? For example, some people work on the industry. Certain kind of data are not given to you. Even if you know somebody, they will say no. And whether if you don't have the data, how do I do it? Still we can do it. Because a couple of our students have worked on different public sector, it's easier. Private sector, they said no. I said, okay, you don't have to. You catch hold of some people who are working inside and then get access of data to them indirectly using intensive interrogations and other things, or keeping their identity safe and all that. Even industry don't need to mention because that's what confidential. So if you have access to that, fine. If you don't have access to the data, then you must also think about that. Then your research, you may not be able to complete in time. And the second one is the appropriateness of this thing. That whether is that research that I am going to do, is it worthwhile? That is whether the topic has issues with clear links to theory. That means you can establish with the theory, or you are proving something. You are not, trying to search something in a haystack, like searching for a needle in the haystack. We are not doing that kind of thing. So that means if you have a research proposal already, what kind of fresh insights that you can get into the topic is what you should look at. And whether the kind of findings that you get, will they be symmetrical? And whether it also, because we also need to look at our own future, see. Because if I am doing something, I must also get something out of that work, whether it helps me in my career. What is my career graph? If I am working on these lines, this is my career graph. I project and I work on those lines. So that means whether the research topic matches my ambitious goals. I want to be there. I want to be on the top of the kind of scholars in this particular field. That means I must work in that. All this, my ambitions is not building castles in the air. we were told in the childhood, we learned a story of Alaska. He was selling glassware, and he used to sell glassware and then get that money and then return that money, and he gets commission from the company. One day he was sitting in the railway platform and then put the glassware in front of him, and then he started dreaming because the train time is there. He started thinking, okay, I will sell this, I'll get this money, I'll start a small poultry, then I'll become big, and this fellow will have nobody to sell this thing, and the owner will come to me, please give me a job and all that. I'll say, get lost, and kick him. He kicks the whole basket. The all crockery is gone. So we should not daydream. We must be clear. The goals so that we set, whether they are achievable. If that is the case, am I moving in the right direction? Whether this research helps me in that. So that clarity is also an important one. Appropriateness, and whether the research is it worthwhile. And the third, why is it jumping so fast? Yeah. And then third one is the rational thinking. Next one. That means after looking at your own strengths and interests, you must know, okay, that's the rational thing. I can do it, I cannot do it. This is possible for me, this is not possible for me. And you also would look at whether somebody with similar kind of work have they achieved. That means I look at the old kind of projects that are done. Research work done, my own university, my own institution, how many have worked in these areas, similar areas, what kind of things they have done, all that. And you start discussions. I think I'm on the right slide because this is moving. Yeah, this is one because it's jumping. So these are the techniques that generally we use. One is a rational thinking. Rational thinking is the first one. Then similarly is creative thinking. Searching the literature is another one. Scanning the media, newspapers, nothing. Also, we can also do the kind of research based on newspaper reading, events in the city, or matrimonial columns, or accidents, or the kind of things that are reported, the way newspapers are structured, all that. So scanning the media can also give you some ideas. And brainstorming. Brainstorming is another technique that we use. And also we draw a relevance tree. That's another approach. Exploring past projects is another one. And then discussing with people. And then you keep an idea notebook. And this is what we also look at. So first one is rational thinking. Rational thinking is what we talk about. Examining your own strengths and interests, looking at the past project titles. Somebody has already done this kind of thing, it doesn't attract anybody else. So let me look at that and then discuss with some people whether this kind of work will be good or bad. And you also look at the literature and then you firm up your ideas. You also scan the media. Media can be your newspapers, or because in newspaper also a lot of interesting articles we keep coming in, center page articles, other kinds of things in the broader areas. Then it attracts you. Somebody working from a different angle, why can't I look at it? How a particular technology or a particular idea can be used to understand what I am trying to do it. So you start thinking on that in a rational manner. And then second one is a creative or what you call a more critical kind of a thinking. This is in the critical thinking. What we do is we keep a notebook of ideas. See, this is important because what happens is when you are working on something, well, traveling it becomes obsession. When it becomes obsession, when we are traveling, we find some people playing or something, suddenly some idea strikes to you. If you don't write down that small idea, that word itself will flash your ideas, and so that you can go back and expand. So if we don't do that, what happens is we forget that, and afterwards we scratch our head. That was an interesting thing. I'm not getting it. So that is why you always should have a notebook of ideas. Keep a notebook, put that, get back, and then elaborate. Explore your personal preferences. You are exploring what are my personal preferences in this. Using past, if these are all the research projects, what are my preferences and what interests me more? And then you draw a relevance tree of these ideas. It's like a mind mapping. And then those things you put before a set of people who are supposed to be good in that area or who have some knowledge in that area. You brainstorm that. So critical thinking starts with that kind of thing. And examining the projects when we are talking about, what are the kinds of interests, my personal interests we are looking at. Having some academic knowledge in that area is important. It may be as a part of reading, you can do it, or you can focus more on the sort of ideas about which you want to conduct your research. And that means there is a need to think about in pursuing these ideas in terms of what your future work would be. And that is what you need to plan in this. And then, of course, like a literature survey, looking at past project titles is also important for you. What are the different dissertations are available? In fact, now you have Index India and other kinds of things, or you have ICSR thesis volumes, different topics, topic-wise, and you can get the dissertations. We used to, now of course it's much easier. We used to go to library and search all those kind of huge kind of books. Now with a click of button you get your Google Baba is there, and also you have Google Scholars, Google other kinds of things, and also many other search engines available today. And many of them, even Wikipedia also gives you some ideas. Not that everything is written in Wikipedia is right, but many of them they get corrected. It's their open sources. So things are much better today than what they were. So, and that means you can look at different projects at the universities, titles you can look at, you can also capture, because many things by looking at that it captures the mind. And when we read the books, it's not that you have to read the entire book first and then do it. There's a way to read the book to understand your book. You go to index or you go to the contents, which are the kind of particular things are more important. Go and skim quickly, and that is interesting, then you read. Otherwise, you read the whole book and say, this is not useful to me. It's not that you waste all your time to identify that is not useful to you. So there is a way to even survey, do research, literature review. I'm sure you must have learned about that. And actual research projects you have to scan through. And one thing you have to be aware of is a project that is in your library, it does not guarantee about the quality of the arguments or the quality of observations that project has. It may be very good, intensely done project, but it may not be one. But what you need to look at is whether this is useful to me. If it is useful, to what level they have done and what is that I need to do it. And that is where scanning actual research projects helps us to determine the kind of quality of the arguments or quality of observations that a particular project has. Certain projects are good, you select them and look at how they have done. And then you discuss. See, discussions doesn't mean you have to discuss only with those who are, who have what you call a silky hair like me. It's nothing to do with that. you can discuss with your colleagues, friends, sometimes with kids, because ideas come from different sources. And you can discuss with your research supervisors or colleagues or different professional groups and all that. Because through discussion, you are trying to test whether your ideas are worthwhile to be researched. And that's what you need to do it as a kind of this thing. And I think okay. Selecting from the literature is you know how to do it. I don't need to go into all that this thing. I quickly tell you that you survey all kinds of articles, scientific articles, books, journals, or dissertations and other sources which are useful to you in your particular area of research. And also, you must also know what kind of a theoretical propositions are there in that area, so that you would like to look at them and then maybe you contribute to the theoretical kind of findings. So it is where a literature survey gives you a background to your research work. Background in the sense you know these are you are mapping out the research topics and then say this is what I've done, this is not done, so these are the gaps, this is how I want to do it. So the results of other studies and the relevance of those studies for your research problem is what you look for when you search the literature. And it becomes a comparison of your research with others' findings. That means others have done this, but that is not exactly true because my research points out this. So that provides you comfort. That's why when we are writing our arguments, because research is an argument. Your entire thing is like an argument in the court of law. The attorney will argue, say that my client is not guilty because of these kind of things. These are the relevant judgments given. These are the kinds of evidence I have. All that. He's arguing. You are arguing your case, convincing others, and then saying, so these are the way I'm established. These are the facts. These are the evidences. So that's exactly what we do when we do literature search. And so that means once you are well versed in this, that means you are demonstrating your knowledge of the research problem. I always tell my colleagues, my students, that a person who is working, a student of mine who is working in that particular area, he is better than me, because he has greater knowledge about that problem area than me. But I am only trying to tell how you are looking at logically this whole. I am only trying to state. It's like a Google mapping only, not beyond that. We must recognize if a student is working in that area, a student gains that kind of a knowledge and they demonstrate that knowledge, and a student has the authority in that. As a researcher, I have to demonstrate that knowledge and in the research problem. And that means once you have that knowledge, you have the ability to critically evaluate the relevant literature. And it also demonstrates your ability to synthesize and integrate the existing literature. People, see, literature survey, literature review is also an important area. Most of the people do it as if author-wise the review. If you do author-wise reviewing, that is not literature review. It should be topical, it should be subject-based. Then only you know what kinds of differences, what kinds of variations are there in the research or in the particular problem area. And that is where synthesizing from the literature that you have skimmed is important. That is where integrating the kind of things that you have skimmed through in the literature and synthesizing them becomes important. That is one of the skills. That means you have mastery over that. If somebody says, you will say, so and so talked about this, so and so did not talk about it. Don't try to tell that. And then you have that kind of a mastery helps you to get new theoretical kind of insights. If you want to, develop new conceptual models, that mastery is important. That kind of integrating, synthesizing is important. So that means what it happens is, it points out that your research will make a significant contribution to the existing literature in the problem area. That's where, when any kind of a review is done, this particular research adds to the existing literature. That means you have something carved out your niche in that area. And that is what is important when you do literature review. Literature review is not doing author-wise. Please keep that in mind. If you are doing author-wise, you are doing a wrong way research survey. A lot of people do it. But thematically, if you do it, all the authors will go into brackets. Your own ideas you are reviewing. When you are reviewing ideas, when people have those ideas, then all those fellows will go into brackets. They have not been the so and so said this in his work, in this what is done. That means you are only reviewing that fellow's work, not the relevant work in that entire range. So that's what you must keep in mind when you are doing it. And the last one that we are talking about, keeping a notebook of ideas. This is one of the creative techniques we must use to keep is a notebook of ideas. Always keep a paper and pen, so that some idea clicks, you write it down and you get back and then further elaborate on that. So what it means, that is, you are noting down any interesting research idea that strikes you. As you think of them, and of any that is of equal importance to you, that means that particular thing has sparked your ideas or thought. So that itself can be, it's like what you call eureka experience. And suddenly, in fact, you can take the example of Newton. He sat beneath an apple tree. If we were to be in Newton's place, possibly we'll eat the apple and enjoy the apple. But Newton said, why it has fallen? He did not go all over and threw apples around. He only said, using that idea, it sparked this thing, and they talked about gravitational laws. So, this is where what sparked your thought is that idea. If you write down and then you can elaborate and link it, and then you become something different. So you can pursue that idea using more rational thinking technique later. So the keeping notebook of ideas is important. So, and the projects kind of things you can take, which are the most important kind of project that you found out. You can list them, and for each project, what you can always ask 3 important questions. That is, what is most appealing to you about that project when I am reviewing research project when I am looking at. What is good about that project is you must ask. Why is the project good? And putting 6 of them and say, in all the 6, this is what is important for me. And select 3 projects you do not like within that. Why you do not like? That means your ideas, you are trying to make them much more this thing. And then for each of these projects, what do you dislike about the project? Like what you said there, what do you like it there? What is bad about this project? What is good about the project you are writing there? Why is this project bad? Why that project is good? So that is where you are concretizing your ideas and then trying to narrow down the kind of projects that are there, how those projects are important for you, and what is that you are looking for. And then, you are starting with a broader concept from which you are generating further topics. That's how we are doing it. Each of these topics becomes a separate branch from which you can generate further ideas. More details of branches. That means you are trying to talk about the tree. And that is where each topic is branched out further down. And then you are narrowing down your more concrete kind of ideas. And that means as you are proceeding down in the branching levels of the lower levels, more ideas are generated and recorded. So that means you are from the broader idea, you are coming to the narrower ideas and then trying to link all that. So then you can examine the number of selected and combine those ideas to provide a better research idea for you. So that is how we are generating our ideas and then forming upon a research problem and a research topic. And that means I can look at number of selected kind of sub-branches ideas and generated and recorded, and then how they can be combined to provide a research idea. That's what he said. We are narrowing down good research projects and bad research projects, and what is good in that, why you like it, and all that. That's how you are branching down here also. And here, what you need to do is you need to define your problem. That is what sort of ideas you are interested in. The first thing. As precisely as possible, you narrow down to that. And then ask for suggestions. I am interested in this content, what kind of suggestions are there? That is relating to the problem that I am not studying. And the third aspect that you need to ask is record all the suggestions. When people are, because the discussion, when people are suggesting to you, you are not listening, you are recording down, and then you should not ignore any kind of idea, because some people say they criticize ideas. Even that criticism you must take down, because any kind of a thing, before you denounce or before you rule out, you must have that idea tested. So don't say that it is some idea is a trivial. There is nothing trivial. It is trivial only when you test it and prove that it is trivial. Trivial things can become most important kind of ideas. We must, many times in daily life we think, it's normal, what is there in that, we say. But that something normal, what is there, if somebody else looks into that, they develop it into beautiful ideas, and then they can turn that into a greater research projects. So don't leave out. So no suggestion should be criticized or evaluated in any way before all ideas have been completely considered. And all suggestions, however wide, should be recorded and considered. People might say, we do that, do this. First, gather, because you are taking suggestions. And that means you are trying to collect as many suggestions possible that you got. And then review all the suggestions and explore which is meant by each one, and then say how far they are feasible, what is important there. So that means analyze the list of suggestions and decide which are the ones which appeal to you most for your research study. That means you are taking the lot of kind of things and then trying to see which is most relevant for you. And then you are coming to the last one, is refining the research ideas. So using a Delphi technique, that means Delphi technique, what we do, we have a group of people who are either involved in your, are interested in the research topic to generate and to also choose more specific ideas. And then you can put these ideas, that means by using Delphi method, we need to brief the group of members first about the research idea that you have and encourage the group members to ask clarifications from you. It's like a throwing board. And then they will shoot questions to you, then it further triggers your ideas and then further sharpens them. And that means each member need to justify his or her ideas, and a consensus is arrived at the end of the that is Delphi method. You put all this and then firm up. That means you are refining your research idea by this. And that means you are conducting a preliminary study using that as what piloting we do that. Because before finalizing the topic, you are doing a piloting so that what is the feasibility, how far, because the pilot is like a mirror image of the larger one. So if you have, you can even elaborate how much would be the cost, how much would be the time, what kind of your questionnaires or your schedule something, how much time they take, all that. So before finalizing the topic and objectives, we need to reflect on the topic that you have chosen. So objectives that you have, or what we call is a SMART method: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. I think you please caution me on the time because.
No problem, sir. Someone yesterday, Doreen, is she here? was asking about the questionnaire, how to formulate the questionnaire.
Okay. I'll finish the thing.
Yeah, please, sir. After you finish,
yeah.
yes, you can.
So,
time is there, sir.
yeah. So, writing research questions is, what I said SMART is about the objectives have to be SMART. That means they have to be specific, they have to be measurable if we are doing a quantitative kind of thing, or achievable and realistic and timely. Because timely is important because if, for example, there is a drought or there is a big flooding, and you say that wait, I will make the study and come back after 1 year, the people would have been dead or everything would have been lost. The methodologies also evolved accordingly. See, longitudinal studies are different. If I am doing a long time kind of survey study, that whether at the end of the study, whether it is still timely, it can provide solutions. That is where, in fact, my teacher used to tell me, in the research methodologies, we have something called windshield surveys. Windshield surveys, you sit in the car, people from the center and other things, experts will come and go and visit the sites. To the car, they will see the kind of devastation that has happened. Or areas where they cannot go by car. Sometimes if they go by car, it will be problematic for them because they have not done earlier something. So thereby, it's better to fly. So they can see aerial survey, kind of devastation, what kind of measures. That means timely solution whether your study provides or not. If you do your study by the time things have changed, your study has no value. So that's where SMART becomes important for you. The objectives have to be SMART. So when you are writing research questions, write research questions that are consistent with expected standards. Research questions where you have some idea, your research question is ambiguous, people understand differently, they'll give you answers differently. That you will think, they are not consistent. It's not that they are not consistent, we are not consistent. We are not clear what we want to ask. That is where when pilot, we have to be very clear about that. So, whether using those questions, am I able to get or produce a clear conclusions for my study? That means, will it give me that kind of inputs, the questions? That means they should be not too difficult for the people to understand and respond. they should not be too descriptive. Because when I am putting a question, it's not that yes or no is again problematic, because they could be lead kind of questions, or I may be talking about something, don't you think weather is very warm today? I'm telling that fellow, yes, it's warm. And if you go and ask this question in Europe, you go and ask this question elsewhere, answers will be different. They'll say, no, it's not very warm, it's pleasant today. It may be 40 degrees, but still it is pleasant. For some people, it is 50 degrees, it's still 40 degrees, 45 is pleasant, depending on the acclimatization of that. So when you are asking questions, you must understand whether the questions are relevant, whether the questions are unambiguous, clear, and then what possible answers you are giving, whether the possible answers are appropriate. How have you arrived at these possible answers? From the literature survey, from the kind of pilot testing, or from doing a kind of grounded theory approach, all that. So that is, you should not be very descriptive kind of. Sometimes when we have, it is also true when we have seminars, somebody is, instead of asking question, he will give another seminar. And at the end of this, the person will have to ask, can you tell me what is your question? So we should not become too descriptive in describing the whole thing and then ask a question. Clearly say that persons are able to understand your questions. That's what is important. So consistent with expected standards of asking questions, and whether your questions produce clear conclusions and at the right level. That means it is not difficult for them to understand. Not too descriptive is one thing. And then when you are trying your ideas into research projects, useful techniques we must adopt, like start with the general focus questions, which we all use it. When you are traveling in the train, you first, of course, we will quarrel over the seat. After the settling down, slowly you break the ice and say, where are you going? So and so, you break the ice. What you are doing, first because you don't know the person, you start with general questions. Oh, it's very, very hot nowadays, isn't it? It's no, what you have to start with some general breaking, and then we do that. So useful techniques generally are, start with the general focus questions, broader kind of questions, and then discuss areas of interest with your supervisor or others, and then identify. That means useful techniques for turning your ideas into research projects is this: general, and then slowly coming to specifics. Writing clear research objectives. Whether the kind of objectives that you are putting there, whether you must check whether the preferences for stated objectives are emanating from your kind of surveys that you've done. And then use general focus questions to achieve precise objectives. And that is what you start with in turning ideas into research projects. And in fact, this is what we generally do. That is gathering facts, what questions you ask, descriptive kind of research, in descriptive. That is where when you have more kind of data-oriented kind of work, or even more qualitative kind of work. Then using questions that go beyond description and require analysis. For that kind of a thing, you need to ask why questions. First one, what questions, when you want to have more descriptive research kind of these things. Why is where you are further trying to ask. I always feel, children are very inquisitive. And I always tell a researcher, you must probe like a child. Child asks a father or a mother, why it is so? It's like this, like that. Why it is like that? When they keep asking why too many times, after some time you exhaust your patience, one thing. Another one is you exhaust your answers. You have no further data available to you to convince your child. They say, don't ask anymore. This is how it is, what it is told. It has to be like that. Don't ask further. That means we are killing the inquisitiveness of a child. Then dictating, saying that this is the answer. You don't ask beyond. Then that inquisitiveness should not be killed. So when you are asking why, that of course why we are not asking even to ridiculous level. Why we are asking to get much more depth to the idea. And that is where, why we are doing that is for these two things. Explain the phenomena, to analyze the relationships, and predict outcomes, and compare and generalize. This is why we ask that. And I am sure, when a child asks the questions why it is so, child is wanting to explain the phenomena, get to know about that, and then analyze the relationships. Why these kind of things happen? If this happens, that happens. In fact, if you ask a child, don't touch, it will burn. The child will go and touch, because child has to learn. Once you touch it burns, and next time child will know if you touch these kind of things, it is bad. So we also ask, by asking those questions, we are trying to analyze the relationship between variables and other kinds of things. And what are the kind of outcomes we can predict based on that? Once we know the relationship, the kind of thing, then say these things happen, this happens. And we can compare that and lead to generalizations. And so, this is what, when you are writing your research proposals, organize your ideas, because purpose of the research proposal is to organize your ideas, to convince the people that your research ideas are good, worthwhile to be funded, worthwhile to be pursued, and you also use that to contact your its clients, or if you are doing for certain clients, or you you identify who can be the best tutor for that, but best person to advise me. To meet also ethical requirements is also important for us. Whether my research meets all the ethical requirements. Now we have in many kind of research institutions ethics committees. Science fellows require much more, because whether if I am using an animal or plant or the kind of thing, whether it's ethically correct. If I am doing on social kind of problems, whether I am doing ethically appropriate, whether my research harms the communities more, or things like that. So ethical requirements also you have to talk about in that. And then what are the kinds of contents that we talk about is the title. I am not going to go deeper into them, because the title should not be too long, because title should not become like an essay. The title itself, this title is indicative. It also provokes other fellows. That title is very attractive and very interesting. When I am saying a topic like this, that the tribe is dead, long live the tribal. Tribe is dead, that means tribe as a concept is dead. How can a tribal as a community can survive? Long live tribal. How is possible? I have an idea in that. That idea I am putting in the title. The title sparks different kinds of imaginations. Title should be attractive.
Sir, could you talk about the difference or distinction between a research design and a research proposal?
Okay. When you start building a house, what you do is you plan the model of your house. Blueprint. Design is nothing but a blueprint. And
a proposal is developed based on, or you use this to develop a proposal in a better way, wherein you say that how much of time you require. For example, I start with any kind of project when I'm planning. I'll say time for maybe first 1 month. I use it for surveying literature, desk review. And then I would say next to this thing, I will develop instruments of for my research. It could be a questionnaire, it could be an elaborate kind of what you call a research guide, or what you call checklist, and or what you call that interviews when you conduct. You don't go with, sometimes it is a qualitative research. We don't go with questionnaire and pen and pad. We go there, and we have all the questions in the back of mind. We'll write them separately, go and talk to people. Each question when you ask, further you ask questions based on their answers. That means you're probing people. And then come back and write your notes, and then verify what kind of things that you missed or what kind of things are still there to be asked. That means you have, it's like a checklist. When you go to shopping, if you go without any kind of a list, you will keep browsing, you will waste time. But I have a list of things, you'll ask, okay, I want to see these kind of items. You tick mark, these are all done. This is not available here, you go elsewhere. So that is what you do it in qualitative. In a quantitative, we have, for example, if the case study method, you say what kind of a case study. It is a quantifiable kind of case study. For example, if I want to study a comparative study of countries in terms of population growth or other kinds of migration rates, then I am doing a case study of those countries and looking for certain kind of data. Right? So there, my data sources and other things are defined by my design. Searching the sources is also defined through that. So these are meticulously worked out so that you know how much of time you require for each stage. And for example, field work or data collection, this is the time. And then you foresee verification of the data, checking the data, again you do that. So when you, because research design is important because it tells you the current state and tells you where you have problems and difficulties and how to overcome them. If there is a problem of data, then you can't stop saying that my research is over. If that data are not available, try to say what other things can substitute. So you must have alternative plans. If this is not there, this is alternative. If these particular kind of respondents are not available, I must have alternatives. So that's where even in sampling you have replacements and other kinds of things. So these are all the ones that we get in design. Design is the kind of a guide for you where if you go wrong, how to get back. But proposal is a much larger one. You use this to reach the larger one. So that's how I can tell you much simpler.